Como presidente del Comité Español del Consejo Mundial de la Energía, es un placer para mí daros la bienvenida a esta nueva edición de nuestra tradicional jornada anual del Comité, titulada Energy and Climate Futures, Europe After the Energy Crisis. Es la sexta que celebramos en este auditorio, que como pueden apreciar otra vez, tenemos gente presente, lo que nos alegra muchísimo. Gracias por venir y gracias a los que nos siguen en streaming. Y gracias a todos los patrocinadores y a los ponentes y moderadores que conforman el programa. Este evento es híbrido y está transmitido por Zoom desde este auditorio. Está previsto que tenga una duración total de 3 horas y media. Hemos dividido el programa en varias sesiones, una de bienvenida, 2 plenarias, una mesa redonda y la sesión final de conclusiones, donde tendremos el honor de contar con la vicepresidenta tercera del Gobierno y ministra de Transición Ecológica y Reto Demográfico, Teresa Rivera. Algunas sesiones son en español y otras en inglés y para todo ello cuentan con traducción simultánea en todo momento. Para ello deben conectarse a la sesión a través de Zoom. Y a través de Zoom también pueden dirigir preguntas a los ponentes de la mesa redonda. Para los que estáis en la sala, las azafatas disponen de papeles y un micrófono para formular las preguntas. El evento de hoy forma parte de una saga que llamamos Energy and Climate Futures, que desde 2017 hemos abordado una gran variedad de temáticas que van desde la gobernanza energética, los ODS, los aspectos financieros, las transiciones energéticas en diversas regiones, los planes de recuperación o la diplomacia energética española, por citar algunos ejemplos. Para esta edición, desde el primer momento que empezamos a organizarla, allá por el mes de mayo, estuvimos convencidos que el hilo conductor debería ser la invasión de Ucrania por parte de Rusia y las consecuencias sobre el sector energético europeo. Y pensamos que había que analizarles desde el prisma del trilema energético en sus 3 vértices: seguridad de suministro, asequibilidad y sostenibilidad. Un trilema que está en boca de todos, pero que el Consejo Mundial de la Energía lleva estudiando desde el 2010 a través de su World Energy Trilemma Index, con el que se compara el desempeño de más de 120 países en relación con el trilema. Se analiza su evolución y las oportunidades de mejora. Desde el CECME participamos activamente en la preparación de la parte correspondiente a España y podemos decir orgullosos que somos uno de los países con mejor puntuación, ocupando la posición número 10 del ranking. Aprovecho desde aquí para recomendarles que echen un vistazo a esta herramienta del WEC y otras, como el Issues Monitor o el Energy Pool Survey más reciente, que permiten medir avances y también conocer mejor al resto de países y regiones. Manténganse además atentos a lo que va a ser seguramente el gran evento internacional del sector energético el próximo año, el 26 Congreso Mundial de Energía, que tendrá lugar en Rotterdam entre los días 4 y 10 de diciembre del próximo año. Y estará bajo el lema Redesigning Energy for People and Planet. Y ya sin más preámbulos, me gustaría a continuación dar paso al vídeo con las declaraciones de los miembros de nuestro comité preparado para esta ocasión y espero que sirvan para introducir algunos de los temas que vamos a tratar.
The way out is through, como decía Robert Frost en su famoso poema, la forma de salir de la crisis es a menudo enfrentándolas de frente y de manera decisiva. En la situación creada tras la invasión de Ucrania necesitamos asegurar el suministro y la independencia energética, además de continuar nuestros planes de descarbonización. Y en CEPSA pensamos que ambas cosas son absolutamente compatibles y están alineadas. Necesitamos que la sociedad, los reguladores y la administración, tanto como la empresa privada, trabajemos en sincronía para hacerlo posible. The way out is through.
En un entorno energético difícil, con elevados precios de la energía y altas tasas de inflación, resulta más necesario, si cabe, compaginar los 3 vectores de la sostenibilidad energética: seguridad de suministro, sostenibilidad y competitividad. Las medidas que se adopten de emergencia a corto plazo no deben poner en peligro el objetivo a largo plazo de descarbonización que nos hemos fijado. Se abren incertidumbres, alternativas, como puede ser acelerar la transición energética, nuevas tecnologías, nuevos diseños de mercado, que seguramente serán analizadas en este evento anual de CEDME.
España cuenta con una fortaleza en materia de infraestructuras de gas que puede ser clave para la seguridad de suministro del conjunto de Europa. Con una mayor capacidad de interconexión, estas infraestructuras no solo van a ser fundamentales para la diversificación de suministro, sino que contribuirán también a la descarbonización de la economía, porque estarán preparadas para el transporte de hidrógeno renovable.
La actual crisis derivada de la invasión de Ucrania por parte de Rusia ha propiciado un vuelco en las políticas energéticas mundiales y especialmente las de la Unión Europea. Esto ha supuesto una revisión de los objetivos de corto, medio y largo plazo, ahora con el foco principal puesto en la seguridad y en la autonomía energética. Las preguntas que están encima de la mesa en este nuevo escenario van desde qué tecnologías son las más adecuadas para cumplir con todos los objetivos, hasta qué implicaciones geopolíticas tendrán las decisiones que tome la Unión Europea. Esperamos que la sesión de hoy sirva para crear un diálogo constructivo que pueda ayudar en la toma de estas decisiones.
La crisis energética causada por la guerra de Ucrania nos ha mostrado con toda su crudeza los riesgos de que nuestra economía dependa de los combustibles fósiles. Estados Unidos y la Unión Europea han apostado por acelerar la transición energética porque las renovables y la electrificación es la energía más segura, combate el cambio climático, reduce la contaminación del aire y nos lleva a una energía más competitiva y con más empleos de calidad.
En el contexto energético actual, y en Europa concretamente, es fundamental la diversificación de fuentes de aprovisionamiento para garantizar el suministro. Por ello, una de las alternativas para impulsar la diversificación energética, continuar avanzando en la descarbonización y garantizar el suministro serán, sin lugar a dudas y en un futuro próximo, los gases renovables. En este sentido, es esencial que exista una adecuada seguridad regulatoria e incentivadora en clave europea.
El contexto internacional actual está viviendo unos momentos de una complejidad increíble. El escenario internacional se está redibujando, los poderes geopolíticos se están volviendo a configurar y esto está generando una enorme volatilidad que está teniendo un impacto muy alto tanto en la seguridad de suministro como en los precios de la energía. Por todo ello, y para hacer que la transición energética en la que estamos inmersos sea exitosa, es fundamental el conciliar los tres vértices del triángulo que configura el trilema energético del que hace ya muchos años venimos hablando en el World Energy Council. Estos tres vértices son la seguridad de suministro, la sostenibilidad y la energía asequible. Es fundamental encontrar el equilibrio del centro de gravedad de este triángulo. Es un enorme reto, pero es un reto al que no podemos renunciar.
La coyuntura energética actual, señalada por la invasión de Ucrania por parte de Rusia, ha devuelto el foco económico y social a un concepto relevante que habíamos olvidado o cuanto menos dejado de lado: la seguridad del suministro. El futuro y la estabilidad del sistema energético de la Unión Europea dependerá en buena medida de tener un modelo diversificado y seguro para mantener y proteger nuestra soberanía energética. Para reducir esa dependencia del exterior, el impulso de los gases renovables, biogás, biometano e hidrógeno será un factor clave de éxito, como reconoce la propia Comisión Europea en su plan Repower Europe. Un vector energético crítico para incrementar nuestra autonomía con recursos autóctonos y todo ello sin renunciar al ineludible proceso de transición hacia un modelo descarbonizado en el 2050.
Iberdrola, Naturgy, Repsol y Sedigas por su continuo apoyo. Y comenzamos la primera sesión. Y me gustaría a continuación presentar al ponente en la primera sesión plenaria hoy, Tibor Stelbatsky, Principal Advisor for Energy Diplomacy dentro del área Global Agenda and Multilateral Relations del European External Action Service. Tibor no podía acompañarnos presencialmente y va a participar a través de Zoom y ya veo que está preparado. No habla por español, por lo que cambiaré a inglés para presentarlo. Good morning, Tibor.
Good morning from Brussels.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and joining us today at such turbulent time in the UA history. Please let me introduce you properly to our audience. Mr. Szczepaski is an experienced diplomat with a demonstrated history of working in the EU decisions-making as government representative from Hungary. Skilled in European policies, public policy and regulatory issues, policy analysis, European law and decision-making. As I mentioned, currently he's a principal advisor for energy diplomacy in the Department Global Agenda and Multilateral Relations of the European External Action Services. He has a Master in Science Economics and PhD in International Relations, both in the Budapest University of Economic Science. Mr. Szczepaski, once again, it's a pleasure having you here with us. When you're ready, please, the floor is yours to talk about the new role of energy in the European foreign policy.
Thank you very much, and good morning once again from Brussels. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to participate at your event and representing the views of the European External Action Service in relation to the energy and climate futures questions. I would like to start with two issues, which I think it's very, very much characterizing the situation now. The first is that also in the European Union, but I think Europe and also in worldwide, energy is again back on the top of the agenda. If you just remember, maybe 1 year ago, when we were preparing for the Glasgow COP26 meeting, then it was mainly about the climate goals and the outreach to others on the climate ambitions. Now, if we are heading to Sharm el-Sheikh, the COP27, everybody is speaking about energy and energy transition and how this situation, this crisis now in the energy policy will affect the climate goals and the COP27 success. In the EU, this is absolutely top on the agenda. A week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had here the EU ambassadors meeting. So all the head of delegations come to Brussels for seminars, for conference, for consultations. The event was with the participation of the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. There was also a session with the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, and all these meetings and other seminars, one constant and permanent topic was the energy. So energy is with us and high on the agenda. Another issue is, it is more related to the energy now. This is the weather and the weather forecast. It's maybe strange to change to this, but this is, you will see in my presentation, I hope so, that you will see that why this is important, that we are looking now also the weather forecast for the winter. So the first question is why energy is so much high on the agenda. And there is a very clear answer for this. Namely that the Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and its weaponization of energy policy has unequivocally exposed the risk of the EU energy dependency on Russia, and more broadly, or dependency on the imported fossil fuels. So the origin of the energy crisis is the manipulation of the gas market in Europe by Russia. The extreme gas wholesale prices are direct consequences of the withholding of Russian gas deliveries to the European market. It started before the war, actually. So already in last year, October, so a year ago, that was the first time that Russia delivered 30 or 50% less gas as it was in 2020. Parallel with this, the gas prices and linked to this, the energy prices as well, the electricity prices as well, started to increase. In October last year, so a year ago, it was already 100 euros per megawatt hour. Since 2 months before, it was well below 50 euros. So it very much shows that the war has a very strong impact on this, and on the demand and supply side of the market, it has a very huge implications on the market and also, of course, on the price. Since the war started in February 24, this year, the situation became even more serious. So this is a direct consequence. This is a direct cause of the situation what we are facing now, which is many cases is called as a perfect storm in the energy market. But if we want to be also honest with ourselves, there is another factor as well, which we have to keep in mind and look at it as well. And this is the underinvestment in the energy infrastructure still in Europe. And this question will be extremely important, extremely crucial from the point of view of the solidarity amongst the member states. So we have to keep in mind both issues, but I think it's very clear that the major cause, the major reason for this perfect storm is really the weaponizing the energy and the exposure of Hungary, of Europe, the EU to the dependency from Russia on fossil fuels. So, what was the first thing to do in this situation? The first was the security of supply issue. And preparation for a winter 22-23, so the forthcoming winter season. In this relation, the energy platform was established by the Commission in April 2020, and with the REPowerEU proposal from 18th of May, the Commission implemented the decision of the European Council already from February and March for the phasing out from the Russian fossil fuels. So the main aim of the REPowerEU proposal is the energy savings, to foster and to encourage energy savings, to build up and expand the homegrown renewable energy sources, and the third, to diversify the fossil fuel supplies. In link to this and in relation with this, in 19th of May this year, there was a political agreement among the member states and European Parliament on a legislation for a minimum gas storage obligations. According to these rules, member states need to reach a minimum of 80% of gas storage level by 1st of November, with aim, of course, to be prepared for the winter. Now the storage capacities, the storages are filled more than 90% of their capacities. So actually, the worries about the supply shock for the next winter has eased somewhat in the last 2-4 months, or let's say from the beginning of the autumn. As we see, the member states were able to replenish their natural gas inventories, reaching a worldwide more than 92% by mid-October. And also on the demand reduction, there are very significant results from the member states. So member states are using less gas in this month than it was in the past. It has also already an impact on the price as well, because we see that since mid-September there is a decrease on the gas. It's already around 100 euros as it was a year ago when the price increase just started, which is much less than it was in August, for example, this year, but still much higher, 4 times higher than the summer of 21. So it is still an issue which is important to follow and to look at it, and it should be also keep in mind that for the future contracts, the gas is still 140 euros, or for example for March next year or for April. So we see that this tackling the supply shock, the gas storage success has a very high price, and this is really the increase of the energy price during the summer and in the more overall since the start of when Russia weaponized the energy policy towards the Europe. So what we see now that the focus is more on the energy prices, less on the security of supply issues, and there is a consensus among the member states in Europe that most probably this winter is manageable. So the storages are full. the demand is reduced a bit, and if there is no extreme events or extreme weather conditions, then most probably this winter is manageable. So that's why I mentioned in the beginning of my intervention that the weather forecast is a key issue now in Europe, to looking at the winter. Actually, now in Brussels is sunshine, 20 degrees or 21 is expected today. I had to put the blinds here not to be very bright from the sun. So far, the weather is in our side, but of course it can be very difficult for the winter. So, what is the situation and the preparation for a winter of 23-24? So the next winter. I think that this is a key question, and this is a crucial question, because most probably the European inventories, the storages, could quickly be drained if temperature plunge in Europe, and people are, of course, crank up their heating, and there is a much more demand for heating. This is the same in the case in the US, where the northeastern states, which rely on LNG imports, they are particularly vulnerable to supply crunch in the cold winter. If the storage is emptied, let's say during the winter for March, then March or April, that it could have a several knock-on effect on the preparation for the next winter. And in March, starting from March, it might be more difficult to restock the inventories. We have to keep in mind that there is very likely that there will be no Russian supply for next year. It's important to note that this year, this success of storage filling was partly thanks also to that there was still Russian gas coming from pipelines to Europe, but it's very likely that that there will be no for the next winter. And it's also important that in this year, when we were searching for more LNG, the market situation was relatively favorable, because in China, mainly because of the zero COVID policy, the economic performance was a bit lower than usually. But it can be also with high possibility to expect that China will gear up next year, and then they have unlimited sources to go for the LNG, which means that from March, the situation which will be much more difficult to get the extra supply for Europe. So I think it's very important to know that the major challenge is still ahead of us, starting from next March. What can be the solution? What should we do in this situation? One element can be, of course, and should be definitely the improve and increase the diversification of the gas supply to Europe. And the energy platform and the joint purchase mechanism is a tool to help member states in this regard. As I mentioned, it already in April, the energy platform was established, but during the discussion of the informal European Council in the beginning of October in Prague, and also last week, the recent European Council, there was a very clear demand from the leaders, from the members of the European Council to help this joint purchase and to help the diversification and to give a framework to do this. And therefore, the Commission proposed on 18th of October a new regulation on the solidarity within the energy market in Europe, where a very important part is that there will be a framework, a legal framework for the joint purchase of gas. And the leaders endorsed this during their meeting in the European Council last week. So the energy platform, the joint purchase, can be a tool for helping next year the diversifications and for the preparation for the winter. It's very important. Maybe some words about this platform. It's very important to see that this is the aim of the platform is to coordinate the negotiations among the member states on the from the EU and also from the energy community with the upstream suppliers on the gas purchase. This is based on the companies. So the European Commission will not buy gas on the market. It will be up to the companies. And it's extremely important, of course, that the companies are involved to this exercise. Exactly today, this afternoon, will be the first meeting of the Industrial Advisory Board of the energy platform, which consists companies from the European Union to see how it can be really operationalized and implement this platform. So how it works, the Commission will organize aggregation using a service provider. So there will be a service provider who will give the IT tool and collect the demand from the companies or even from consumers, so high energy consumers, collecting their demand. There will be an aggregation of this demand, and then it will be, offered to the market for supply offers and try to get the matching the demand and the supply. Of course, a lot of information is needed from the companies: volumes, delivery time, duration, entry point, place where the gas should come to European Union. The service provider will do this operational things with matching of the demand and the supply. So the aim is to have a long-standing contract with reliable partners, to build partnership, and to ensure the diversification of the gas supply to Europe. Of course, it's not an easy exercise. This is a very pioneer exercise. So there was never in the past that Europe is purchasing jointly gas for the energy market. It's need a lot of cooperation between governments, EU institutions, and companies as well. It needs also solidarity among the member states, how the purchased gas can arrive to the places where it's really needed. It's important to note that if we look at the map, the most crucial, critical situation is in the middle of the continent, in Central Europe, in countries mainly which are landlocked, so they have no possibilities to achieve port and through to get the LNG gas, and this is the place where the Russian pipelines are ending. This is mainly a broader Central Europe, so including the Bavaria, East Germany as well, Czechia, Slovakia, Austria, North Italy, Hungary, Serbia, and others. So to get there the gas from the ports and from the LNGs, there needs still investment in infrastructure as well. And it's very important to keep in mind that, of course, the LNG might have also some constraints during the spring, as I mentioned, because of the restart of the growth, more robust growth in China, where they will need, of course, the energy as well. So maybe two more points, which I find it important to raise in this question. It seems to be now that somehow the Europe's climate ambitions taking the backseat now to energy. So it's less discussion on the climate, more on the energy security. There are facts also which demonstrate this. Because of the question of security supply, from January to August this year, the EU's coal import increased by 36%. But I think it's very important to note and very important to keep in mind during the whole exercise that the solution of this short-term immediate energy emergency situation needs very much to continue to pursue our long-term climate goals and green transition goals. So I think it's a very important point that we will be not able to solve our immediate emergency crisis if we are not achieve our long-term goals on the climate transition and climate neutrality. And this also valid for the opposite. We need to solve the emergency now to be able to pursue the climate goals. So it's very important that in the REPowerEU proposal from the Commission, there is an important part of measures to accelerate the renewable energy development within Europe. There is a new, more ambitious target of 45% renewable generation in the power sector by 2030. And a plan also includes additional 210 billion euros in renewable energy investment by 2027, with a significant share directed towards solar and wind generation. So all this major readjustment of the EU energy policy, of course, will have an impact on the third countries. I think it's crystal clear, as I mentioned, that if we diversify our energy supply, then we have to build new partnerships and long-term partnerships, mutually beneficial partnerships with third countries. Let it be in our neighborhood, like Norway, of course, Algeria, Egypt, Israel, more broader geographically, like Azerbaijan or the US, of course, which is an important partner for us. But we have to also look at the other areas in the world. But also, this situation provides a fertile ground for hostile narratives. For example, that the EU is using a double standards. We are preaching about climate action, but in the same time increasing fossil fuel imports. So it's very important to make sure and to make clear on this, that actually what we are doing now is really to reply and to find solutions for profound challenges from weaponization of the energy by Russia. So it means that we are not increasing our fossil fuel import, but replacing the Russian one. And of course, we will continue our climate goals, climate commitments. There is no change on this. Even the netto effect of this readjustment will be an acceleration for our energy transition. So it's need a very active communications. That's what the EU will do also in the COP27. But we have to make sure this also to our partners and to be very clear that tackling this situation is not at all anything against the climate goals. They are still valid, they are important, and contrary to some narratives, this situation will just accelerate our determinations towards the climate commitments and our measures and our actions towards our climate goals. So that's the situation more or less, how we see from Brussels, how we see from the External Action Service. As I mentioned, to solving the emergency situation and this crisis need very much cooperation among the member states and the institutions. And of course, I can reassure you that, of course, also in the EES, we are working very closely with the member states and also with third countries to help with all possible tools, the diversification of the energy supply to Europe. So thank you very much once again, the possibility to be here. I am very privileged and honored to be with you, and I wish a very good conference and work to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tibor. I think you have stated very clearly the very important challenges we have ahead. First, how to get this cooperation within the EU for this joint purchase, if it's possible, is something I believe never has been done before and is a challenge. And after, how not to modify our goals in the medium term about our decarbonization and our switching to renewable energies. So thank you very much, Tibor. Y ahora ya pasamos a la mesa redonda. La mesa redonda va a ser coordinada por Marta Villárez Curra. Marta Villárez Curra, catedrática de Derecho Financiero y Tributario en la Universidad CEU San Pablo, academia de número electa de la Real Academia de Jurisprudencia y Legislación de España, abogada en ejercicio del Ilustre Colegio de Madrid y miembro activo de distintas asociaciones. Así, por ejemplo, es vicepresidenta del Supervisory Board de la International Fiscal Association. Es autora de más de 50 publicaciones científicas y está especializada en fiscalidad medioambiental y de la energía. Ha sido miembro del Comité de Personas Expertas para elaborar el Libro Blanco sobre la reforma tributaria. Por mi parte, recordarles que habrá posibilidad de hacer preguntas a los panelistas a través de Zoom o por escrito aquí en el auditorio. Esta sesión también será en inglés. Por favor, Marta.
Many thanks for the presentation, Chairman. And good morning, everyone. It's really an honor for me to address such a distinguished audience in my role as a moderator of this roundtable. The subject is of particular interest to all of us as citizens, at least for three reasons. First, the military conflict implies a shift in different European policies. Secondly, economic, social, and geopolitical impacts need to be considered, distinguishing emergency measures from long-term ones. And finally, because we are living in the so-called energy transition area, a great challenge. Thank you very much. And now, after two shocks, the COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine, many uncertainties are causing a green concern, also in terms of more or less climate change ambition. Developing a coordinated approach for energy security in Europe seems to be an urgent issue, but becomes extremely difficult, like a puzzle with missing pieces. We are worried about the future, and it is a great opportunity to know more from experts. To deal with this topic, answering the question of how to cope with all these impacts, today we have very distinguished guests, and they have all a large experience and knowledge on the energy sector. Perspectives and backgrounds will enrich the debate. It is a pleasure for me to introduce our speakers. Mrs. Ana Maria Sánchez-Infante, who is sitting here on my right, is a financial economist bringing more than 20 years of professional experience in the European private and public sector. She is currently working at the European Commission as policy officer in the Energy Platform Task Force. Her unit is responsible for the energy policy outreach with member states and the overall coordination of member states' work for the delivery of the so important REPowerEU plan and the EU Energy Platform, in line with the European Green Deal objectives. In the private sector, she worked as a financial advisor in the UK and Spain, covering various sectors, among them renewables, energy efficiency, industrials, and also oil and gas. Welcome, Ana Maria. Mr. Marc-Antoine Elmaziga, who is sitting here on my left, is director of the French Institute for International Relations Center for Energy and Climate. He holds a PhD from Sciences Po Paris in international relations, and prior to joining this important institute, he spent 6 years at the International Energy Agency, notably as Russia as Sub-Saharan Africa Program Manager, where he conducted oil and gas market analysis and was responsible for institutional relations with these countries and regions. Before that, he was in charge of a Ukraine observatory at the Robert Schuman Foundation. Welcome, Marc-Antoine. And we have, joining us online also, Mr. Carlos Fernandez. Hello, Carlos, and welcome. He's acting head of Gas, Coal, and Power Markets Division at the International Energy Agency. He has participated as a senior analyst specializing in coal in much of its publication, including this important publication that we already know, World Energy Outlook. He's mining engineer from the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid and has nearly 25 years of experience in the energy sector. He started in the area of engineer and consulting of power plants in the private sector, and then he entered into the Corps of State Mining Engineers by state exam. Was advisor also to the General Director of Energy and Mines Policy and Deputy Director General of Mines of the Ministry of Economy. In 2007, he became manager of the Institute for Restructuring of Coal Mining, and in 2010, he joined the International Energy Agency. And finally, we have also joining us online, Mr. Alexandre Affre. He's Deputy General Director responsible for the Industrial Affairs, Entrepreneurship, and Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Department at Business Europe. He is trained scientific and holds a master in ecology from the Université Pierre et Marie Curie. And Alexandre joined Business Europe in 2007. In this role in Business Europe, he is responsible for coordinating the organization's position on industrial strategy, energy, climate, environment, research and innovation, as well as entrepreneurship and small and medium-sized enterprises. He is also managing the corporate advisor and support group of Business Europe that regroups a selection of companies from all sectors of activity. Welcome, Alexander. And now we will have a first intervention from each speaker to express his or her vision or position on the subject. You will have about 8 minutes each to cover these issues, these important issues. Ana Maria, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Let's see if the microphone works. I think it works. Yes. Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very pleased to be here. I might repeat myself in a couple of issues as my previous colleague from the EES, but I will keep it short in a way that I want to make a little bit clear from a more technical point of view, because as Marta correctly introduced myself, I'm working as policy officer in the Director General for Energy, so we are behind all the different proposals coming from the Commission. So I'm really like me and a lot of colleagues involved in all these different proposals coming from the Commission. So I don't know, I asked for like the screening of a slide just to make clear, but I don't know if this is possible still, the screening of the slide, because I wanted to show a little bit in chronology what has happened in the last year. Thank you very much. I don't know, yeah, hopefully. It's a bit distorted, but never mind. I think you get an idea about what has been happening more or less since a year. So we started in October last year already with a communication where, oops, yeah, no, it's not, okay. We started already last year in October with a communication where we raised, where we were already proposing measures, thank you, yeah, now it's clear, in 13th of October 2021, where we already like made communication proposing different measures member states could implement, because we were already like observing since summer last year that prices in the wholesale market, mainly in gas, were starting to increase. So this was already our starting point like giving member states the possibility to introduce short, medium-term measures, also long-term measures. Of course, everything accelerated with invasion of Russia to Ukraine in February this year. Sorry, I think, yeah. I don't know, this is just, I'm just going to. For that. Yeah, okay. So basically, after the Russian invasion, the Commission, we came up already, after the Versailles Declaration of the member states, we came already with like the communication of the so-called REPowerEU plan. So the REPowerEU plan, as my previous colleague from the EAS was correctly describing, is a plan to like get rid of the dependence on Russian fossil fuels. This was an initial plan presentation, and we came across later in May with the REPowerEU communication. Sorry, I'm just like not going chronologically directly, but I'm really pointing to the main communications proposals we were like coming up. Basically, the REPowerEU plan, as it was already presented before, it has three different pillars. It's diversify away from Russian fossil fuels, meaning finding alternative suppliers. It's also about reducing the demand, because I mean the first easy measure to do if you want to get rid of Russian dependence is to reduce your consumption. And then, of course, never forgetting our like long-term plans in terms of climate neutrality and renewables and energy efficiency targets to accelerate everything related to what we call clean transition, making reference to renewables and energy efficiency measures. And all this embedded in all the possible EU financial instruments in order to make this possible, the REPowerEU plan. Of course, we were including also increased renewable energy targets, increased energy efficiency targets. We were also wanting to, or we were proposing to increase investments in renewable hydrogen and renewable gases like biomethane, etc. So this is all embedded in the REPowerEU plan we presented in May this year. So we are currently really working on that. Also, one of the ideas proposed and now really implemented is the energy platform, which in a way is going to help or should help member states to aggregate demand, going out to the markets and secure the supply of energy for refilling the storage and coming like the best we can through the current winter, and also not forgetting the next winter, which is a little bit our main concern, because I think this winter we are fine. The gas storage are filled, even on top of what we were like setting in a regulation, because we were setting in a regulation which came then later in the summer. We were establishing 80% filling storage this year and 90% by next year, but we were like above this, we are already at above this set maximum storage capacity. Going forward in the timeline, sorry that I go back to the timeline, after May REPowerEU plan, we presented in July, we presented the so-called safe gas for this winter, which means to set like a specific percentage of gas demand reduction for the member states. And in fact, the member states, they have presented this month in October, they had to present a plan how they want to implement this gas demand reduction of 15%. So this was proposed by the Commission, and it was really adopted very quickly by the Council. if I have time, or maybe later in the discussion, I will make a little bit of a difference what we mean by council regulation and the other proposals which needs to go also through the European Parliament. Council regulation, as you can imagine, has a much quicker implementation time because it needs only member states' approval. So going forward, this is what we did until the summertime, but of course things didn't improve, so we had to continue preparing for this winter. So we came up in September of this year, mid-September, with a package, a proposal, again a council regulation, with different energy emergency intervention proposals. So for example, we proposed electricity demand reduction of 15%. We also proposed a revenue cap for inframarginal technologies. We also proposed a solidarity contribution coming from the fossil fuel companies. I think this is not very popular among some of the stakeholders in this event, but anyway, we came up with this proposal. Then, not stopping here, we continued with our work at the Commission, and now recently, 18th of October, and now I finished, we proposed a new package, a new energy emergency package measures. And this is currently discussed because there are some diverging opinions among member states, especially when it comes to putting a cap to the gas price. But I leave it here because I think you will have a lot of questions around what we have been proposing in the last year. I'm happy to answer to your questions when it comes to the Q&A session. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. Thank you very much, Ana Maria. It's impressive, the efforts made by the European Commission to react to this special situation. And now is the turn to Marc-Antoine Eyles-Masega, please.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you, and thanks for the invitation. And I cannot but agree. I mean, what the European Commission has been doing over the past few months is incredible. And what the member countries have been trying to do together is incredible as well. We have moved up several gears, I think, in terms of policy making. And that is a decisive moment. And I think we needed that because a business as usual energy transition wouldn't have worked. So thanks to the crisis, we are there. But the situation is terrible. And I'm afraid we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and we have to be all aware of that. Europe is no more the continent of stability. It is no more the continent of peace. And this was our defining factor for ourselves and for the rest of the world. And so that is a game changer. The second game changer is we have now the highest energy costs and prices among the OECD, but also probably if we compare this to the rest of the world. And that is really a terrible shock. And I'm afraid we're just seeing the beginning of the consequences of this, and our strategic competitors do not have these problems. And that is a big, big issue. And we'll come to that later, but not everything is driven by Putin. So there's a lot of things we can fix ourselves, and that will matter. I'm afraid there will be further military escalation in Ukraine, but also in Putin's war against Europe, against NATO. In Ukraine, it's a colonial war, but let's not also, hide ourselves. We have to face that this is also an aggression on us, and that there is probably also much more to come. So it's our very existence that is at stake, everything that we've been building for the past 70, 80 years in Europe since the Second World War. And so we need now a response to that. So we have seen very good elements of that, but I think we need much more. So let me tell you why. First thing is we need to save much more energy. We are not there yet, right? Next winter, 2023, will be absolutely terrible. And there is just one thing we can really do, big time, is saving energy. And what we've seen so far is demand destruction. But demand destruction is not a response to the crisis. This is just an additional catastrophe to the many catastrophes we have, right? So we need to save our industries, and so we need to reduce demand in the residential sector and the commercial sector to free up resources for the industries, for the real economy. The second point is, how are we going to do that? We need more price signals. and including in my country, in France, the price signal is almost nowhere, right? We are lucky in a way because this reduces inflation, but we need a real price signal. So we need to work on tariffs, and we'll talk about the electricity market reforms in a second, but there is a tariff element there that we need also to agree all at the EU level. We need, I think, very clearly much more demand curtailment tenders, and this, we are currently holding one big one in France for 5 gigawatts. I think there is much more that can be rolled out. On the positive side, we'll have much more nuclear available in France as we pass the year, and that is a really good news because it's been adding to the pain, of course, from everything that's happening to have such a low level of nuclear availability. But let's face it, we have water problems, especially here. Of course, you're all aware of that, but this will be there to stay. And we have problems because in a few countries, including Spain, but also Germany, gas demand and power generation has gone up. And I think that is a big problem, especially for next year. So let's fix that. Another problem that we have is the electricity market design. And on that, we really need to have and unfortunately, a rapid discussion, a rapid conversation, but that has to be very, very tough because we have to prepare right now for, allowing capital-intensive investments in nuclear. We need to have this discussion to allow for all the flexibility solutions we need in the power system, and I'm afraid there will be a need for thermal generation over the next 15 years, probably, and actually much more, in several countries in the EU. And so we need the regulatory framework for that and to give the signal to investors who now look at Europe with a depreciated currency as a possible, actually, opportunity. But if we don't have the right signal for electricity, it won't work. On gas, a few words. Again, we will have next year probably 20 BCM of Russian pipeline gas left in Europe. So that is very little. So we have to offset that. And the LNG market is super, super tight. So there's not so much alternative, but again, to save more gas, right? To preserve some gas in the industry and save gas. There's no alternative on the short term. And then, let's face it, on longer term, by 2030, we will need a lot of LNG, continuously a lot of LNG. So let's face it, we will not source that 30, 40 BCM additional LNG via spot markets. That's impossible. We will just die from it economically. So we need a few more long-term contracts, and we'll need to ramp up by a method. On renewables, Repower EU is a great momentum, but doing 700 gigawatts additional solar and wind capacity in 8 years is impossible. Let's face it. We are just on track to realize this by 2045, and a lot of the problems, it's inflation, it's value chain problems, it's skills, it's equipment, it's the fact that we are competing with the rest of the world. A lot of investment will go from our companies, Iberdrola, the Total Energies, the Shells, etc. They will go abroad. Why? Because the conditions are better. And we have to make sure we are the most attractive area in the world for renewables investment. And if we don't manage that, we'll fail. But this is something we can achieve ourselves. This is not Putin. This is something we have to work on. And I think here there's a lot of room to improve that further. So the energy transition costs are rising. That's very clear. But the good news is, with the inflation reduction measures that have been implemented in every EU country, we are now stepped up the financial commitments from our government. Before the crisis, frankly, the discussion was, are we going to put 1 billion or 2 billion in next year's budget for the energy transition? I mean, these was peanuts, right? So now we have moved to the serious level of spending, which is good. Now we have to gear it toward what is really cost efficient, and I think that is the biggest challenge. And of course, we have to be aware that, much more money will have to be made available, right? So next generation EU funding is not totally spent. We have to improve that. And then we have to start a conversation on the next package, right, actually, right? So in a nutshell, and I'm going to finish, the industries. We are going to lose some of our energy-intensive industries. That's for sure, right? So we have to accelerate on rolling out and deploying the clean energy industries, that will replace that. And we have to do the job conversion, and we have to work on the skills. So that means that including here in Spain, you need, in tenders for solar, for wind, you need local content, you need carbon footprints, you need eco-design regulation. So let's improve that. same for France, same for everywhere, so that, you know, we build these factories here. And let's face it, this is a real competition, and the US is a tough competitor with us now. So is China, so will be Japan. And if we do not take this seriously enough, we will lose on all fronts. And in terms of perspectives, and I'll finish here, I have 5 seconds left, to tell you that we see Spain with huge opportunities out of this crisis, because you have already been very successful in rolling out corporate PPAs. You've been very successful in rolling out solar and wind. You have now a very good and sound hydrogen strategy, I think, with very serious proposals. So very clearly, with the lower electricity prices that you now have compared to us, well, you're in a good position. So you just continue like that, but please, one demand, you know. Let's put our ideologies aside, you know. Let's stop opposing nuclear, opposing, you know, blue hydrogen with green hydrogen, with whatever color hydrogen. Let's just be pragmatic. Let's try to work together and, you know, set aside our difference, because otherwise Putin wins, the climate loses, and our economies and societies also lose. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marc-Antoine, for these optimistic views and very key messages on the importance of prices, having good prices, good signals, good regulation. You have mentioned many, many important issues. And now is the turn to Carlos Fernandez. I hope we will have another perspective and different views, and specifically on investment in the energy sector. Please, Carlos, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Acordé con los organizadores que hablaría en inglés, así que cambio de lengua. Okay, thank you for the invitation. Kind introduction. A pleasure to be there, especially with Marc-Antoine. We spent some time doing the policy reviews of Ukraine and Russia, the two of us, so great memories from those more peaceful times than those. As you mentioned, I mean, as soon as 3rd March, the IEA published the 10 action point plan to reduce EU reliance on Russian gas. But in order to try to avoid a repetition with other speakers and so on, I will look at the things from another angle, that is the angle of investment. I think we will agree that we are in the worst, the first truly global energy crisis, because 70s crisis was more about oil, and the worst energy crisis that we have had. And investment can first to relieve pressure on consumers, and also to help or to accelerate the pace of well into a net zero pathway, and also to spur economic recovery. And indeed, to accelerate also this the end of the reliance on Russian gas that has been also driven by other circumstances. So a challenge that governments, companies, and investors in general need to face is that the short-term needs are not sometimes aligned with the longer term. So this is something that is, let's say, that a challenge or a fact that they must face. So in order to give a number that, as you know, we like to look at the numbers. So energy investment for 2022, we assess that we expect something like $2.4 trillion. So if we compare with the GDP in dollars 2021, this is like, that is somehow below 100 trillion. So this is kind of over 2%. So this, I would say, is a good news in the sense that is well over pre-COVID levels, but this is with two different trends. So we see that the investment in oil, gas, and coal are below pre-COVID, below 2019 level, let's say, And on the other hand, investment in the power sector, let's say renewable grids, is increasing, what is good news given the electrification that and the reliance on electricity in the decarbonization. We observe rising cost is obvious, coming from supply chain pressure, shortage of workforce in many works, or in some works, and also importantly high energy prices that go to many materials. I mean, the two typical materials are steel and cement. These renewables, or we want to say solar panels and wind turbines, are not free from this. So after many years of declining costs, given these elements that I mentioned, we have now a cost rise in solar panels or wind turbines, that this can put a break in the investment despite the strong price signal that the electricity market, the wholesale markets are giving. So this can, I mean, at least the government should be aware of these circumstances, because this is something that didn't happen in the past. If we split rather than by sector, by country, we see that in the clean energy sector, the largest investment is China. This is now, I moved to 2021 data to talk about the real data. So we calculate around $380 billion invested by China in clean energy, compared with 260 in the EU and $125 billion in the US. I mean, we can see this from different angles. Indeed, China is the largest investor in clean energy, okay, but for example, if we see this in terms of compare with population or energy consumption or electricity consumption, our investment in the European Union is higher. Regarding the power generation that, as I said, concentrates most of the investment, basically there are three areas: renewable, grid, and storage, that concentrate the investment. Globally, half of investment are on PV, that is the real champion in this time. Half is utility scale and half is distribution. So we also see some momentum in offshore wind that, you know, compare with basically the dominance, the big dominance of onshore wind in the past. There is also good momentum and efficiency, but we have a higher borrowing cost, so this can be a break in investment. We have many households suffering from the energy prices and inflation that gives less margin for investment, and there is an unprecedented uncertainty that is never good for investment. So now to finish, I would like also to mention as a global trend that most of the clean energy investment are concentrated in mature economies and China, you know, with some exceptions, some bright spots, you know, here and there. You can say PV in India. There has been also good developments in Brazil, but we see that if we want to go to a net zero world, as my boss, executive director of the IEA, Fatih Birol, usually often reminds, CO2 emission don't have a passport. So we need to really think of it, because if we don't have on board also emerging and developing economies, we are not going to go to the, you know, to our goals. I mean, in this sense, for example, the increasing rates in the capital, this will be a big burden there, because indeed the cost of capital that many of those economies face are higher than what we face. So, I mean, as you all perfectly know, a mere 2% increase in the borrowing cost rates can increase the level cost of these high capex technologies like wind and solar by 20%. So this is something to consider. So I think we'll have time to discuss some more things during the question and answer. So I don't want to. I want to leave more time for the others. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this review of the tendencies, of the technologies, of the need for more investment, and this different background, China from Europe. It's clear that we need more resources. And now is the turn to Alexander Affer, and we really want to know more about the business sector perspective. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marta, and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Never easy to be at the end because a lot of things have been said, and I will do my best to complement and firstly to give a broad European business perspective on the situation, the energy crisis situation, how we assess and where we see possible solutions to the situation. But again, probably also echoing some of the comments which have been made by the previous speakers and trying to complement. So I think my first point is on the situation, the assessment of the situation, the diagnosis. Here I will, to a good extent, large extent, converge with several points made before. We are in the middle of a twofold energy crisis. On one side, the supply aspect, with gas very much linked to the situation and the war in Ukraine. Not only, as it has been mentioned, there are other factors playing a role in the supply issues we had and we still have on the energy supply, but to a large extent with the situation and the war in Ukraine. And for us here, something which is really key as business is to avoid in the coming weeks and months, probably months now, but to avoid any forced mandatory curtailment of industry. I think it has been mentioned before, we see in a number of member states schemes put in place, tenders to have voluntary reduction, curtailment of industrial activities with certain conditions, and this is okay. What we really want to avoid is forced curtailment of industry, because even if the situation is already difficult to manage for many industries, if they are forced on a short term to have curtailment, the impact will be really of a wider scale and really negative. So really something we want to avoid. So this is the supply, and of course there is the element of the prices, and this is extremely with high preoccupation. I think it's now very well visible the impact the situation has on industry, with some being more exposed to others, of course, but overall the situation is very difficult. Large, medium, small industries, this is widely spread. There are sectors like in the fertilizer industry where 70% of production has been reduced or even closed. So we are talking about huge figures here. And there is also for many of these industries, energy intensive industries, the element of competition in the global situation where we see the price gap increasing between Europe and some of the major competitors. And this is, of course, at a moment where many industries are looking for the budget for next year, investment for next year. Yes, there is a real challenge for many of them, and it was the possibility of maintaining those investments in Europe, where the conditions in terms of energy prices are really, really difficult. So I think this is in short the assessment of the situation. Now moving to the discussion and the ongoing debates about what has been done, what needs to be done. I think it has been mentioned by if I may, Anna Maria before, the number of, or maybe I should say before, of course, many things have been done at European level, but many things, of course, have been done at national level as well in terms of supply, increasing the supply, and some prolongation of certain energies, nuclear, coal has been mentioned as well. I mean, of course, in terms of supply, things have been developing quite fast at national level, and also in terms of measures to support citizens and industries. A number of initiatives have been taken at national level. But yes, as it was mentioned before, many things have been happening in the last months at European level in terms of increasing the efforts to supply energy, LNG, but not only via from third countries. We have seen as well good initiative by the Commission about the decrease of demand for electricity and gas, and that's maybe an element of comments by me, of course, and this is really difficult to manage, but here there is the need to find the right balance between the need to act fast, and this we fully acknowledge. I mean, I'm saying myself, the energy prices situation is really difficult, so we need actions, we need to act fast, but to be balanced with also the need to have sufficient consultation of those who will be asked to implement the regulation and the policies. And I'm talking here, of course, for business and industries. So, and here it's a difficult balance to be found. And it was mentioned before, proposals like on the inframarginal revenue cap, on the solidarity contribution. Even if we can understand the rationale and the objective, yes, especially because I think certain lack of consultation by some sectors or the concerned sectors, not sure the design has been the best which could have been achieved, and there are big questions about being very vigilant and avoid a situation where we put less capacity for the sectors to invest in the transition and to supply the energy European market. So I think this is really a point, I think, of extreme vigilance to find the right balance between speed, but also the need to be sufficiently in contact with those who will be implementing. I think. Now, from our perspective, Business Europe perspective, especially on the prices situation, the high energy prices that are in Europe and where industry is really struggling, we think more should be done, and we have been clear for some weeks now. One of the concrete measures which needs to be not just considered, but also implemented at European level, we think is the decoupling of electricity prices from gas prices. As a temporary measure, as an emergency measure, and you need also to have the necessary safeguards to avoid negative impact, but and it will not, of course, solve all the problems, but it will certainly, on a short term, help mitigate the overall energy bill for citizens and industry, of course, as well. So I think this is a concrete measure which really needs to be tabled very soon now. Nobody has mentioned as well the state aid, the European state aid framework, which we think as well is extremely important. to be well balanced here as well in terms of providing space for member states to provide the necessary support for affected industries, and at the same time maintaining a level playing field in the single markets. But here, this is also a very important element of the debate. And maybe to finish, not to be too long in my first introduction, but of course, like several said, we are dealing with the short term, and actions have been taken, more needs to be taken, but there is no doubt about the long-term trajectory and the long-term decarbonization goal that we need to maintain. It's less visible now, of course, but there are still very intensive discussions about the Fit for 55 package, and this will be key for the long term, and we are very supportive of finalizing this very soon. And of course, elements about investment, which was mentioned just before, will be key to make us, will be key to address and bring us on track for the long-term decarbonization objectives. And I stop here for my first comments.
Many thanks, Alexander. I think there are so many ideas on the table that maybe we can discuss just in a few moments and have a more interactive part of this roundtable, because you mentioned, Alexander, the risk of some sectors, some enterprises, like the chemical sector or fertilization, but also Carlos mentioned the vulnerability of households, how to combine that. And we all have mentioned the solidarity contribution. I think your presentation were very much thought-provoking. And now it's time for a more interactive dialogues with our speakers. But let me just announce like a practical question. There will be some time at the end for questions from the audience to the speakers. And please indicate to whom the question is addressed. Now we start this other part of the session, the part of dialogue, and go into some key ideas. And I would like to have a question for Ana Maria. What do you think, which dominant European energy policy pathways will emerge from the current crisis?
Yes, well, basically a very important message from the Commission in this sense is that we have not changed our initial plan of the, you may recall, European Green Deal when we started with a new Commission headed by President Ursula von der Leyen. So this Green Deal ambition is still there. We still are heading for the 2050 climate neutrality, and in this long pathway we're still going for all the proposals we have been presenting within the Fit for 55 package, which was also mentioned by the previous speaker. So all this is still on our table. It's still being negotiated. Currently, the Fit for 55 package in the different packages is still under negotiation by what we call co-legislators between Council and European Parliament. The Commission, we are there for technical explanations and advisory, but the co-legislators are currently negotiating. So this is all still going on. This has not stopped. So just as a reassurance that we're still with our initial plan, European Green Deal, climate neutrality, and the presented Fit for 55 package proposals. So this is a little bit like my main message to the audience that this has not changed, in fact. And with this new context, and I finalize here, we will be accelerating all of these different proposals and even increasing some of the proposed targets. So in that sense, we have to head for an acceleration in order to get rid of this dependency on Russian fossil fuels. And I stop here because I want to leave the other speakers also to intervene. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana Maria. I then understand that climate change is still in the middle of this puzzle. That's right?
It is, and I have also to reassure you that DG Energy, where I work, we are always in close cooperation with our colleagues in DG Climate, meaning also between Vice President Timmermans and our Commissioner Kadri Simpson. It's a constant exchange, and we are like cooperating the different services on our different proposals. So this is, I mean, this has not stopped. And I would say even more taking place now with this new context. So we have not forgotten. On the other hand, we are even more like enforcing and willing to accelerate all what we have been proposing in their energy part.
It's good to know that. Many thanks. Okay. I have one specific question to Mark. Because Mark, you mentioned the importance of taking into account the position of the states. Mm-hmm. Is the EU going to end up more fragmented, and what is needed to avoid this fragmentation, notably of energy market? Because you mentioned specifically the importance of regulation and the importance of prices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, many thanks. I think that's the biggest risk, clearly. And there is elements of fragmentation already visible and elements of erosion. I mean, in times of crisis, it's normal, but you know, this is where we should really work against that current and try to get some order and more coherence, etc. Why do we see this fragmentation? It's political. I come from France. With France and Spain, it's been very difficult on energy, notably in past months. But it's also incredibly difficult between France and Germany these days, not only on energy, but also in defense policies. Actually, we've probably have one of the worst relationships we've had over many, many years between France and Germany, but also between Germany and Poland, between Brussels and Poland, between Brussels and Budapest, you name it, you know, you can go along like that. So that is very bad. And then we have the economic and financial fragmentation, because most of the member countries can only spend something like around 2 or 3% of GDP to alleviate the pain of inflation. But we have Germany that is ready to spend over 8%. And of course, the challenge and the issues are much more bigger in Germany than elsewhere for obvious reasons, but still. I mean, here you have this fiscal devaluation that is happening, and that is a big challenge for others. And in Central Europe and other parts of Europe, you cannot spend so much. Although you would need to spend so much, but you simply cannot with your own resources and in going to the sovereign borrowing markets. It doesn't work like that. We have also another problem, which is that we've introduced massively fossil fuel subsidies, but in a little bit probably unconcerted and too large way. For example, in my country, in France, there's a 30-cent gasoline tax reduction per liter for everyone. And I mean, this is what we've been telling to the rest of the world for the last 10 years, since the G20 Pittsburgh meeting in 2010. Let's phase out fossil fuel subsidies. And then we were kind enough to say, let's phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidy. But we are just reintroducing super inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. And, it's just not France, it's everywhere. I'm sure here in Spain there is issues as well in that direction for the fishery sector or agricultural sector, etc. So, we have to be serious about targeting that. And so another issue of fragmentation, which we have to really have center stage as we design these policy responses, is energy poverty. So I think it's really now, eating into the middle class. But also the differences within Europe are huge, right? So, in Bulgaria, colleagues tell me that, the energy cost of an average household is now way above 30% of their income. 30% of the income, way above. Whereas more in France, it's still somewhere between 6 and 7%, right? And so, of course, with Spain, it might be much bigger, etc. But still, I mean, we have to be aware of that. And our union will not resist to these huge discrepancies, right? And on energy, clearly, clearly, one of the ways to avoid this further fragmentation beyond what I just mentioned is, to clarify that, well, all these patches we do in the electricity systems and, the availability to subsidize all out retail consumers, etc. And of course, many of these are necessary, but let's work on, on harmonizing that, on setting stages to progressively come out of that. And to have the deeper, more structural reforms of the electricity market. And I have an idea for colleagues from the European Commission. Maybe a way to avoid this fragmentation on the renewables, which is one of the key, that's one of the obvious responses we have, is perhaps to try to raise transparency among the different member countries on how come that, in France we have these and these delays on permitting, or we have these and these requirements, and how come you don't have this, but you have something else in Spain or in Greece, etc. And why is it, and what is being done to really improve that, and to really track this, and to have some very clear benchmarks on, what are operators on the ground telling us on how effective actually the measures are to accelerate. And so we could benchmark that among ourselves, and the industries and the investors and everyone could, say, oh, Spain is doing great, and I don't know, France is doing bad, or vice versa. But the point is, and then to have some very clear ways to measure that. And I think that would be very powerful to raise also the pressure, on governments and on public administration, etc., to do the job actually, and to really deliver on that.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with you. Transparency is so important. Transparency and cooperation, but I don't see if transparency and cooperation are very much aligned with competition. Competition among states, competition among industries, technologies. Let's turn to Alexander, because I think the things you are mentioned are very much related to the state aid framework. And I have a question for you, Alexander. Is the current state aid framework, the temporary crisis framework, fit for purpose?
So first, I think this is one element of the toolbox to deal with the situation we have now, as I was mentioning. So we do think that this is one of the important elements of the measures to be implemented. The European Commission has already has developed a framework for to deal with the situation, the crisis situation. Of course, looking as well at the energy situation. And is now in the process of updating and I think it should be now the final text of the revised European state aid framework should be soon published. Here, what is really important for us is first to have an extension, because the current framework is to be effective until the end of 2022, and we, I think, all know that the situation will remain for 2023, so it has to be prolonged to next year. Also, we think we need to have some improvement on the scope of the framework, to have more industries exposed to the high energy prices being eligible to possible compensation at national level, again, while maintaining the level playing field. I think this is really key, and the good state aid framework will allow this. So an extension of the scope of industries being eligible to state aid intervention. And lastly, also to think about some of the eligibility criteria, because when we look at the current framework, there are questions around some of them. For instance, companies have to have a negative or have to have negative earnings to be eligible for state aid compensation. So basically, they are forced to continue producing with massive losses, with the hope that at a later stage, they will be able to have some state aid support. But we think this should be the other way around. So that's one example of an eligibility criteria where we think some improvement would be much welcome. Just to again illustrate where we see some room for improvement.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have one question for you, Carlos. Do you think that clean energy technologies are to be blamed for the current crisis?
Yeah, this is a very good question that we can read anything in the media these days. I mean, of course, everyone has the right to give their own opinions, but I think there in the Club Español de la Energía, you follow IEA publications, presentation, energy investment, and also World Energy Outlook. And for many years, the IEA, we have warned that there is a mismatch between investment in the different, let's say, part of the sector. So for example, if we take the case of oil and gas, we saw that upstream investment never recovered 2014 levels, whereas when after the price drop, investment decline and so on. But demand, however, now it has recovered. In the case of gas, has really surpassed quite largely those levels. So we see this. At the same time, we see that the increase in renewables and clean energy, let's say, is fine. But to put this in clear numbers for you, whereas oil and gas investment are more or less just about aligned with our net zero roadmap, investment in clean energies should triple to go in this roadmap. So basically, what we see is a clear mismatch, that has not resolved. So in our view, the solution is clear. What we need is a boost of investment in clean energy, across all technologies, and as I said before, across all markets, and until we don't solve this mismatch, we'll have this situation, and I think this is why when someone blames, let's say, this global energy crisis, put the blame on clean energy, basically, this is not supported by evidence, So I think we should really distinguish. Can we improve market working? Sure. Can we improve regulation of gas, electricity markets? Sure. Can we improve market design? Sure. Can you improve infrastructure? Sure. But all this apart, I think we should be clear. I think for people, and of course, I think is what the evidence suggests, that the current crisis, as I said, the worst crisis in at least 50 years, and the first global energy crisis, basically is the real reason is the gas supply crunch, and the problems with the largest energy exporter of the world, that is Russia. So I think we have enough evidence on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this clear message. We are going to mention efforts in supply, efforts in demand, and I would like to question. I have a question to you, Ana Maria. How can climate ambition be politically sustainable in the midst of this energy crisis, in spite of being compatible with demand reduction measures?
This is a very good question, because in a way we have to make clear to the citizen, and by citizen I also englobe businesses, all the different stakeholders we are targeting with our measures, to make clear that investing in clear energy transition is not the main cause of this global increase in energy prices. So starting with, it's a little bit of a blame game, starting from the institution side, from the Commission side, we have to improve our communication to the normal citizen and make this clear, right? So this is the first kind of homework we have to take back, and in fact, we are really working on improving our communication in that sense. So secondly, I mean, to make clear what it means in terms of cost. I mean, this is really like going back to the technical details, what it means producing energy from the clean energy perspective, what it means when a wind power produces energy, solar energy, etc., what it means in terms of cost for the consumer. What it means producing other energy sources with fossil fuels, what this means in terms of cost. Then we go into technicalities. The electricity market design was mentioned many, many times, which is also currently blamed for this. So we have to also be a bit cautious in this sense, because the electricity market design was put as an example until recently, until we started to have this problem of the high energy prices, which was put as an example of what works on EU level, because we have to think about energy market in an energy union-wide market. So we have also to be cautious in terms of what we want to improve in the current setting and for how long. And so it's a bit of difficult current situation from the institutional side. We have to propose target. All what we are coming up now, we have really to bring it to the normal citizen, because the citizen is the one who is going to demand for renewables, who is going to implement in their households energy efficiency measures, and we have to explain in a better way probably what it means that eventually they will see a decrease in their electricity bill at the end of the month. So this is a little bit where we are currently also focusing our efforts, apart from bringing up every single month new proposals which need to be implemented. This was also correctly mentioned. We propose on an EU level, but then it needs to be implemented on a national level in order to see the final result out of what we are tabling on the member states' table, so to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very, very clear. It's so important to communicate with key messages to the citizens, and, for example, to explain in a clear way what is self-consumption, for example, and what kind of resources are going to citizens have from national budget or European budget. And that's just an example. I think maybe, Alexander, you can also have some more inputs about what kind of measures, in your view, can effectively lower energy prices for European businesses in the short term to prevent further production, because we know targets in 2030, 2015, and so on. But in short term, what are your feels on that?
Yeah, my answer is, I mean, there is an easy answer to the question, which is basically to readjust the supply and demand. And because we know this is something which has been challenged in the last months. So, as we have all said, make more efforts on the reduction of demand. This is citizens, this is industry. I think industry has been doing quite a lot. Sometime because of demand destruction, as it was said before, sometime by switching fuels, sometime by other means. But I was looking, so there has been, compared to last year, there has been a reduction of gas consumption in industry by by around 20% lately. So industry has been acting there. Citizens are really key as well. Price signal, of course, plays an important role as well. I think the education with the risk about supply disruptions is also an element that could and should be heard by citizens. So I think we should not forget about this element when we are speaking about demand reduction by citizens. So this is reduction of demand, increase of supply. I think we have been discussing this a lot. There is one element I would like to add on the increase of supply. This is about, and I think there is an ongoing reflection in the European Commission about this, about how possibly some of the existing European legislations could be, or their implementation could be made more flexible to give more space for energy sector to produce more energy. I hear some comments about, for instance, the Water Framework Directive having some impacts and challenge for the hydropower sector to produce more electricity, for example. There is also the example of the Industrial Emissions Directive, which regulates industrial emissions, not CO2, but other pollutants. And here there is possibility to have flexibility in the implementation of the directive, again, to give some space for large combustion plants, for instance, to produce more. So we are talking about ways to facilitate the increase of supply, energy production in Europe by adjusting some of the existing legislations in the implementation, I would say, so to give more flexibility. So again, energy, balancing energy demand and supply is going to be key for the short term and the long term, of course, to decrease prices. And the other element, and I finish with this, is what I said before. For us, this is a very concrete proposal to have an European-wide decoupling of electricity prices from gas prices. I know some are talking about the structural long-term reform of the electricity market, and it was rightly said, and we share this, that so far, I mean, the electricity market design has delivered, and we should not blame what has been the system so far. So I'm not so much commenting on the long-term reform of the market design, the electricity market design, but in the short term, emergency measure to have this decoupling would be extremely important to quickly lower the energy bill.
It's very, very clear message. It's good to hear that the answer is not tax subsidies and tax reliefs. I would like to know something more about France and Spain. And Marc-Antoine, can you comment just a bit on Macron's latest announcement on a French-Spanish corridor from Barcelona to Marseille?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, it was for us in the think tank community really quite astonishing to see that, you know, there was all these developments in and all these demands, these long-standing demands from Spain and Spanish stakeholders, you know, to increase the cross-border capacity and to link up with Germany and other places where there is a need for gas and where there's no LNG infrastructure, and tomorrow where there will be a lot of need for hydrogen and byproducts, right? And indeed, we were a little bit surprised, or at least to say the least, when we had heard some very tough words from our president end of summer on the impossibility to consider anymore the MidCat extension, or at least to basically redo some of the environmental and engineering studies to make sure that at least we know for sure what would it cost, how long would it take, etc. So that was a moment when I think here also in Spain, and I'm sure you've shared, many of you have shared this, that it was, it was not understood, and it was almost insulting in many ways. So I think the latest announcement is a good news. What it means exactly is not quite clear, of course. So what is clear is that MidCat expansion, that's gone forever, right? What is, however, this new offshore project could have a gas phase. So phase one could be gas still. Now, of course, it's designed and precise enough. So, in a way, you might argue, well, that's a response to say, okay, now we have something, but, it's distant, and in any case, you need to make sure that the hydrogen supply matches the demand, and so as long as you don't have clarity on that, nothing will happen, right? So, but still, I think it's the start of a change of mindset in France on hydrogen, on the possibility of France to be a bridge between, indeed, a super production center here, in your part of Europe, and a super demand center in Germany. I think we still need to work to, as I mentioned, bridge the differences of views of, what are the colors of hydrogen, what can really be supported or not, or whether, and to, to give some level playing field there. And so today we have Chancellor Scholz having lunch as we speak now with President Macron. And so I think one of the outcomes of that lunch, let's see, but will be that Scholz will hopefully join the summit of Alicante. And I think then we will have a meaningful conversation starting on a major piece of infrastructure that at some point will come. And so I think it's a pretty good news. I agree, it's still vague, and there's some disappointment on the gas pipeline, of course, but still, there is a perspective.
Let's see. Many thanks. We move to coal and nuclear, and I would like to ask Carlos a question. To which extent do you think coal is returning, and particular in Europe? Because we are very much concerned about the cost of paying nuclear phase out and so on. What do you think?
Thanks for the question. Everyone who knows me knows that, it's my pleasure to talk a bit on coal. So as we repeat at the IEA quite often, we need to be based on facts, So again, if we follow media, we can listen to either one of the two stories, either the coal is collapsing, coal demand is collapsing, or coal is the renaissance or the whatever. And actually, the data are very much against that narrative. So coal never went out, went away, and therefore has never returned. If we consider global coal consumption in the last decade or so, actually it's more stable than any other fuel. It's if you put a line and you move 3% up and down, global coal consumption has been always in this range. So it's never, as I said, never went away and never returned. So that said, there are as the main competitor of coal is gas in the power sector, we can say, or at least in the short term. Of course, high gas price is an invitation to burn more coal. But this is true or not? Yes or no? So if we go to China, India, the largest consumers, we see that, gas never played a role there and never was thought to play a big role in the power generation. So basically what we see now, in India is mostly driven by economic growth. In China is more about the drought and the heat wave. So we see a increasing coal power generation these days, but it's not related with the energy crisis. So it's basically internal dynamics. In the margin, you can argue that a little bit less of gas power generation is true, will be covered with coal. We go to other places like Japan or Korea or Taiwan, and there the gas procurement strategy is more based on long-term contracts, mostly oil index, with a bit of spot purchases. So again, in the margin, we will see a bit more of coal burning, okay, but I mean, it's not that much. In the US, business as usual, coal decline, coal power plants are being closed, maybe slow down, but we see a coal decline despite high gas prices. So yes, I mean, the place where things are really unexpected, let's say, is Europe, where if we see any forecast they made 2 years ago, no one would have forecasted an uptick of coal power generation. But, and of course, if we see the countries, again, the media, Austria, France, Greece, Hungary, Finland, Denmark, Spain, Italy, Germany, they all are returning to coal. But if we put the numbers, I mean, only in the case of Germany, we are talking of serious numbers. I mean, for me, it's very, very illustrative, the case of Austria, where, a 240 megawatt plant already closed is now trying to be connected to the grid and so on. So, all the noise for 240 megawatt that maybe work or maybe not, work. But of course, in the case of Germany, we are talking about 10 gigawatt of coal that was expected to be offline, that will be online. And yes, I mean, will be some million tons of extra coal burn. But I mean, we have seen now the determination, which Ana Maria just mentioned, that EU plans and every country's plan had not changed. I don't know of any case of any country that had changed targets for this. I mean, you can argue that France would have liked to close down all the coal power plants earlier, okay, or the UK, but in the, let's say, in a 3-4 year time, no change of strategy is really perceived, and the volumes that are involved when we compare in Europe, I mean, when we compare with a global perspective, is really not that much. So if we are talking this year, over 30 million tons, that okay in Europe additional burning, okay, is a big thing, but China burns more than 10 million tons every day. So in the global scale, it's not that scary. So I think I think this is my view on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Values and targets are important, but numbers too, as you have mentioned. Now I think we can move to try to answer many questions that have been to me from our audience. I read the question, and maybe you can choose who want to answer. The first one is very much related to bureaucracy, because as Alexander has mentioned, business needs urgent measures and short-term measures, and this is the question. No se ha hablado de la importancia de acelerar los permisos y la tramitación. ¿Qué medidas habría que tomar? Relajar condicionantes ambientales, centralizar competencias. Ahora es prioritario acelerar nuevas renovables y es el principal cuello de botella. Who wants to answer this question? I don't know if you... No, it's just...
I can take it up, but I don't know, from
the audience.
No, but I don't know if any of the, I mean, I can quickly make a point, because on the faster permitting for renewables installation, we know it, well, when I speak about we, it's the Commission, we are very much aware about that this is a bottleneck for the installation of renewables. We came up at our REPowerEU plan with, in fact, the idea to accelerate this permitting. And this is, again, I mean, one thing we come up and then the member states need to implement. How they do it, we don't get into any political discussions. If they do it on a more centralized level or a more regional level, this is up to each member state how they want to implement those measures. Here, really, there's no comment because we have to give the freedom to the member states to do it their way. But we like observe this as a very important bottleneck because we can't wait for more than a year. Well, the renewables investor, he or she can't wait more than a year to implement their project. So this is a clear message to the member state to improve their permitting process. Full stop. I can't say more because it's really more for the member state to come up with an improvement in that sense.
I agree with you. It's a question of answering at national level, maybe, and who will be the most efficient to take this type of limitations in consideration. There is another question addressed to Alexander Affer. Subsidies to all consumers versus the subsidies only for the most vulnerable. What is your view on this?
Okay, sorry, I just put it down and I answer, but I would like to, if you allow me, Marta, just to have a few comments on the permits as well, because, of course, full agreement about the need to speed up, simplify the permitting of renewable energy and permit for low carbon technologies. So full support for this, but we have the feeling that there is not enough attention as well about the permitting of industry in general. I mean, if we want to be climate neutral by mid-century and meet our long-term decarbonization goals, and we have to stick to this. We know that manufacturing industries, steel, chemicals, aluminum, and so on and so forth, they will need to transform themselves as well very much, and the processes. And so they need permits as well. And so this is, of course, very much relevant for renewable. This is very much relevant for industry at large. And here I agree, there is a national element, but there is also, I didn't fully understand the question, sorry for this, but I heard about bureaucracy. There is also an element of excessive bureaucracy indeed at European level. What I mean with this is there are a number of European legislations which add layers of requirements, time on industries, including directly on permitting of industry. I was mentioning before the Industrial Emissions Directive. This is one very concrete example. It's a proposal which has been tabled by the European Commission in the last few months. It will prolong, complexify the permitting of industries. So that's something to be aware and to address. I think there is an element of national implementation. There is also an element of European level here. I wanted to make this point. On the question, no, I think it's clearly, I mean, money is restricted. The finance available are limited. We all know about this, so they have to be well spent and in the most targeted way. And so the easy answer to the question is it has to be targeting the most vulnerable consumers. I think this is clear from my perspective.
Thank you very much. There is one address to Marc-Antoine. In your view, what are the main security challenges in the future? It's an open question. Sorry.
Well, yes, so I suppose energy security, I think, so in the coming weeks and months, it's the security of critical infrastructure, right, from various hybrid threats. And we've seen in the past that these can be targeted, and you know, we are living in the area of, some say, the weaponization of everything, but clearly this is a very concerning trend, and in many areas, I'm afraid we're not well enough prepared for that. And because we have 27 member countries, but our energy systems are interlinked with our neighbors beyond in the east and the south, and so you know, we have to level, for example, the cyber protection and capabilities of our member countries to the highest denominator, but also to include all our neighbors, etc., because the vulnerability point might be in a small neighboring country that is not part of the EU, but this is where the risk or the threat might come from. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think we are going to face problems in electricity supply security if it gets really cold, if we don't have wind or solar when it gets very cold. And here there is a possibility that we will have load sheddings, actually. And so it would be really a big problem if we would have to tell people, like, you know, we told you, we warned you, you didn't want to listen to, you know, the additional efforts that have to be done on savings, and that we come to that point. So let's try to avoid that, and let's be much more serious in terms of laying out exactly how everyone can resist and be empowered to resist and to save energy. I think then beyond that, yes, there is the price risk for our supplies. We will remain dependent on oil for the foreseeable future, no doubt about that. And here I think we need a new dialogue with the producers where, you know, we agree on a kind of corridor of prices, you know, that makes them happy and that makes us happy. And where we can pilot basically the progressive, we'll soon have the peak oil demand, and where we can then pilot the slowdown in investment to avoid we have shocks, because this is just the worst we need, you know, and so we have to go back to that. I think they deserve a fair amount of revenues. They deserve these revenues also to invest in the low carbon alternatives, and we deserve to avoid these shocks and these political interferences so that we can also stabilize our societies and economy. So that will be an interesting avenue to go for. On gas, again, now we've siphoned off every available spot cargo in the world, and will continue to do so in the next years, no doubt about that. So we need also answers to Pakistan, to Bangladesh, to all these countries that have been deprived of LNG totally, and that will never go back to LNG, let's face it, right? Or at least in the foreseeable future, because it's just too expensive or too risky. And anyway, their currencies are depreciating, they have a very bad rating. So, you know, nobody is ever going to sign any longer-term contract with them. So here we also need solutions, and I think that comes with, you know, mechanisms of like, you know, the just energy transition mechanisms, things like these. And then last point, we have to invest massively on storage, on electricity storage. That's clearly now the big thing. And here we have to be aware that the US is, for example, much more advanced already for various reasons in terms of laying out you know, battery storage and grids and houses, and so transmission distribution grid houses, and you know, and learning from all these virtual elements that are related to piloting these systems. I think so that is to come big time to Europe now. We also have to work on the longer term solutions, so be it hydrogen, be it thermal storage, etc. And here, obviously, to put more R&D, because there's no way around that. So we will need this big time, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's important to have good signals in long term, too. I agree with you. I have one open question to all the speakers, asking for taxonomy. ¿Ha sido sensato incluir al gas natural en los mecanismos de la taxonomía? And there is another question coming from the same people. Por otra parte, ¿podría comentar alguno de los panelistas la importancia de las materias primas y los nuevos materiales para la transición energética? Litio, cobalto, etc. Taxonomy, who wants to taxonomy and gas?
I can quickly give an answer from the institutional point of view. We came up with taxonomy, I think it was the beginning of the year, and it was very much in the media that, like we proposed, Commission proposed natural gas as a renewable energy, and we never really proposed it as a renewable energy because it's not a renewable energy. So this is first in terms of clarification, and I think it was not very well communicated, probably starting by ourselves again, by the institution, by the Commission. Second, we presented it, of course, as a transitional technology because we are very much aware that we cannot change from one day to the other to be 100% renewables. It needs a transition period. So this was behind it. And then the taxonomy sets very strict criteria in terms of what to consider within the taxonomy or taxonomy accepted. So there are very strict technical criteria under which natural gas can be taxonomy compliant. So I hope I might have hopefully explain a little bit what was our proposal at the beginning of this year in terms of natural gas and taxonomy. But happy to listen to other opinions, of course.
Maybe Alexander, Carlos, or Marc-Antoine, you would like to say something?
Yes, very briefly. I think we had to compromise on that, right? And so, of course, it's not perfect. But I'm so concerned now when I hear that some interest groups or member countries want now to launch legal claims against that, because frankly we don't have the luxury to go on for these never-ending fights. I mean, we have to move on and we have to concentrate our energy on other topics which are much more relevant. And so this is what makes me really a bit concerned now. So I think the compromise was fine, more or less. And now on the metals and minerals, I mean, this is the obvious big thing where we have also underinvested. And we will have clear bottlenecks, and we already have clear bottlenecks as we speak in copper, for example. And we also have the big question of Russia, not only in hydrocarbons, but also in minerals and metals. We have the Chinese taking very strong positions in all the elements of these value chains. They have done this very systematically over the past 15 years, and we have sit back and just actually not even watch. So they're not to blame. It's really our challenge now, our fault. So the US, Japan have really now very serious policies in place. So the EU is going to finally ramp up its game also in this area. But I think, and with the Raw Material Act that is coming, but I think it's a matter also for the member countries to work together. So, for example, the electricity TSOs really, work together to identify what are the copper resources they need, how are they going to be sourced, etc. Why don't we have common purchase mechanisms? Why don't we have common stocks for certain rare earths that are critical for certain industries? I'm sure there's common things between France and Spain where we could work together on that. And then we need the mining diplomacy. So we need the European flag backed by heavy diplomacy in a number of places around the world to show that we have to be part of that mining and sustainable mining and refining, yes.
Thank you. Maybe, Carlos, you would like to add something on taxonomy and gas?
First of all, I would like to compliment about bureaucracy, because as I said, as soon as 3rd March, you can check our web. We mentioned about the need of fast permitting, and we were asking, facing reality that this needs a concerted policy effort, because as Ana Maria has wisely said, this is for member countries, even for regional administration, in the case, some size of installations and so on. but includes many things, many things about administrative capacity that in some administrations are really understaffed, includes a perfect definition of responsibilities in some legislations, includes or will improve with the digitalization of processes. So yeah, it's not one solution for everyone, but I mean there are a few things that can be done. And also, again, just going back to our recommendations in March, there is one bright spot in which spot in which will benefit largely on this fast permitting, that is PV in the roof. This is a sector which clearly, because we understand that if we put a big, wind park in a mountain, I mean, this should be, properly addressed, listening to everyone, and this cannot be short. But a PV roof shouldn't be that complicated, So I mean, there are things to do. Regarding the taxonomy, I think Anna has been also very, very clear, and I think we can discuss days or months, but I don't have, to be honest, anything valuable to add to what Ana Maria has said. So, in interest of time, I will leave it there.
Thank you very much. I think we are now at the end of our roundtable, but I would like to ask our speakers just a headline or final message as a key takeaway from this interesting panel. Ana Maria?
Well, first of all, it's a very pertinent event, and like the topic couldn't be of much more importance, and I hope that at least from the Commission point of view, and being working there, I've been approaching you a little bit better with what we work and for what we work. And it was very interesting also to receive your questions, and we're always open to any feedback and any communication from your side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What about you, Marc-Antoine? Final message?
Yeah, final message to thank you for your attention, to tell you that I think the dents of the crisis really imply that we as think tanks have to work more together, and with platforms like also the WEC, of course. And so I look at Gonzalo, my colleague, so we will do more work on with Elcano and IFRI also to smooth things and to lay out some positive, constructive perspective in terms of energy cooperation between our countries. So yes, we'll be back on these issues.
Thank you very much. Carlos, it's your turn at headline.
Yeah, I will repeat what Samael has said. This is the worst the first and the worst global energy crisis. And I think now everyone should be, at the height of what is expected. And when I say everyone, means everyone, and everyone is every citizen, every country, and every institution. So I think it's not, and I mean, clearly, this is something that will remain in history, and I think it's time for think of how to face and overcome the crisis, and it's not time, to make a dispute and to increase the fragmentation and all these things. So I think we should be aware that this is serious, and we should all countries, institutions, and citizens contribute to sort this out, meaning reducing demand overall, and accelerate our priorities should be aligned with long-term priorities, protect the vulnerables without entering, in loopholes, and as I said, to be mindful about what is at stake in this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very important, Carlos. And finally, Alexander, a key message in 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. I have to admit, I had for the last 5 minutes, I was not hearing very well. The noise was not good. So I wanted to comment on the taxonomy, but it's probably too late now. So just my very concrete, my final message, as you can imagine, because what I said before, this is very much about the situation with the high energy prices being very existential for many industries. And this is something that needs to be tackled now. And this is why we are so much demanding on an additional EU-wide measure, which could take the form of a temporary decoupling of electricity prices from gas prices. I think that's my main concrete message.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our speakers. I have learned a lot, and it was really, really a pleasure to moderate this panel. Thank you very much.
All the panelists, and has been a very, very interesting discussion. So now we move forward to the second session, el futuro del clima en las negociaciones internacionales. Y por supuesto tendremos que hacer mención y va a estar centrado en lo que es la COP27 que se celebrará en Sharm el Sheikh. Y hablaremos un poco cómo el contexto actual de la crisis energética afecta a estas negociaciones, los objetivos principales, escollos y el papel del sector privado. Queremos dejar un espacio para que Egipto, el organizador de la próxima conferencia, nos dé un poco la visión con la que lo afronta. Y por ello tenemos aquí para una presentación a Sarah Henry, de la Embajada de Egipto en Madrid, que nos va a hablar de esa visión. Diplomática de carrera, lleva 3 años en la Embajada de Egipto en Madrid, donde trabaja con temas de la inmigración, cambio climático o el terrorismo. También se encarga de la participación de Egipto en las organizaciones con sede en España, como Organización Mundial de Turismo. Anteriormente trabajó en la Embajada de Egipto en Guatemala. Tiene un máster de Género y Diversidad en la Universidad de Oviedo en Asturias y estudió Ciencias Políticas y Económicas en la Universidad del Cairo. Sara habla español, pero hará la presentación en inglés. Muchas gracias. Tienes la palabra, Sara.
Buenas tardes. Gracias por tenerme con vosotros hoy. Voy a hacer mi presentación en inglés porque me siento un poco más cómoda hablando de tema tan técnico como el cambio climático en inglés. Ladies and gentlemen, I will talk to you a little about Egypt's vision of COP27 this year, which will take place from the 6th to the 18th of November 2022 in Sharm el Sheikh. We realize that COP27 is taking place in a very challenging international context, as the world is facing complex challenges, namely the current geopolitical tensions, threats to food security, and rising energy prices. Additionally, we are experiencing financial challenges that are particularly affecting developing countries, like the burden of national debts and increasing interest rates, at the same time that the impacts of climate change are worsening. Science is warning us that it is not getting any better if we continue on the same path. However, our president-designate of COP27, Minister Semah Shoukry, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, once said, COP27 represents a unique and timely opportunity for the world to come together, recognize our common interests, and restore our multilateral cooperation. In fact, global warming is no longer a distant or a theoretical threat, but a phenomenon that affects all of us. Nowadays, millions of people around the world are hit by more frequent and intense droughts, wildfires, storms, and floods. And that is with temperatures having risen by only 1.1 degrees Celsius. Relative to pre-industrial levels, of course. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has made clear that every additional 1/10 of a degree exposes us to further threats. It is time for the world to shift from pledges and potential contributions to delivery and implementation through timely and holistic actions at scale, as recommended by scientific research and confirmed by the political commitment demonstrated in Paris and reaffirmed in Glasgow. We need to continue working towards keeping the 1.5-degree goal and remaining well below 2 degrees. It is also time to set some clear indicators for implementation, especially the delivery of pledges on finance, and to assess our resilience as well as our adaptation and loss and damage financing. There is no doubt about the pressing need for achieving a balance between reducing emissions from all sectors and achieving the legitimate aspirations for sustainable development, as well as adapting while building resilience with just and fair transition as a core principle. In that sense, adaptation and resilience represent key priorities for Egypt during COP27, while ensuring financing and technology as enablers with a special focus on Africa. African countries are committed in principle to adopting renewable energy and refraining from exploiting their fossil fuels. But just transition also requires that the continent's broader development needs be met in sustainable ways. Furthermore, the bill for the proposed transformative adaptation agenda must be shared fairly. In this context, it is worth noting that African countries are the least contributors to climate change, yet they suffer greatly from its impacts. Around 600 million Africans, which represent 43% of the population of the continent, 600 millions have no electricity, and around 900 millions do not have access to clean cooking resources or clean cooking fuels. Adding to that, the high cost of adaptation with an elevated debt burden are resulting in a high cost of finance compared to developed countries when it comes to transition. There is a clear need for mobilizing more finance for adaptation, reviewing the current policies of international financial institutions and multilateral development banks, and setting a minimum scale of finance for the new replenishment of the Green Climate Fund of not less than $10.5 billion. We must also agree on the new finance goal of 2% of gross domestic product of GDP in developed countries. Additionally, developed countries must honor the pledge they made last year to double adaptation finance by 2025. Going back to 2009, developed countries pledged to provide $100 billion annually for climate action in the developing world by 2022. This is only a small portion of the more than $5.8 trillion needed up until 2030, according to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Standing Committee on Finance, the UNFCCC Standing Committee on Finance. And yet, this amount has not been delivered. We need an increase in the scale of finance pledges, especially for adaptation, at COP27 compared to those made at COP26 in Glasgow. For the presidency, loss and damage financing is also part of our main priorities. We believe that we can make a significant progress in discussing financial arrangements to reduce the gap in financing loss and damage suffered by countries that did not cause the current climate crisis. This remains contentious, but we can approach it constructively, guided by the priorities of developing countries for the benefit of all of us. Moreover, we need to work tirelessly to raise our ambition concerning mitigation actions, while working simultaneously on adaptation to the current impacts. We must move from rhetoric to action in cutting our greenhouse gas emissions and removing carbon from our atmosphere. In this regard, we welcome the revised nationally determined contributions, NDCs, by several African countries and also by India and the United Arab Emirates, among 18 other countries that submitted their revised NDCs during this year. We are glad to see investment in climate technology is booming. This includes new carbon removal technologies, electric transportation solutions, and renewable energies. As a result, clean energy prices continue to fall. Almost 2/3 of renewable power added in G20 countries in 2021 cost less than the cheapest coal-fired options. In Egypt, we are on track to achieve the production of 42% of our energy from renewable resources by 2035. Developed countries are witnessing important changes in their transition to cleaner energy as well. And gas is being factored in as a transition cleaner fuel, as well as hydrogen as a future source of energy that has the capacity to unlock the potential of renewable sources like wind and solar energy, which are abundantly present in many developing countries. Egypt is one of them. At its heart, climate action is a bargain. Developing countries have agreed in good faith to help tackle a crisis they did not create, on the understanding that support, particularly financial support, would be provided to complement their own efforts, which are often limited due to their scarce resources and competing development needs. Developed countries must uphold their end of that bargain by supporting both mitigation and adaptation, thus fulfilling their envisaged responsibilities in the Paris Agreement. To that end, the COP27 presidency team has worked on a set of initiatives that will be launched during COP27 in November to ensure that implementation is taking place on the ground and to link the efforts of the UN specialized agencies to the global work of combating climate change under the UNFCCC to deal with its adverse effects. All initiatives take into consideration both adaptation and mitigation measures to ensure a balanced implementation with the inclusion and partnership of women, youth, and civil society organizations. Up to date, Egypt has finalized the consultation processes to launch several initiatives during our presidency of COP27. Consultations are normally complex and lengthy processes, as they involve all stakeholders, UN specialized agencies, as well as local and regional associations. More initiatives are still undergoing these processes, but up to date, we have 7 initiatives so far that we would like to receive the support of our friends and partners. These initiatives, I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them deal with water and climate change, food and agriculture for sustainable transformation, decent life initiative for the least privileged societies in Africa, sustainable urban resilience, greening national budgets in Africa, African women's climate adaptive priorities, and Africa just and affordable energy transition. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Sara. Llevamos mucho tiempo hablando de Europa y nuestros problemas y no está mal oír de vez en cuando otras áreas del mundo que quisieran tener los problemas que aquí tenemos. Ahora vamos a pasar a una intervención que será también por Teams de Cristina Peñasco, para hablar de la COP, de dónde venimos y otro enfoque de hacia dónde va la siguiente COP. Cristina, que ya debe estar conectada en línea, es profesora e investigadora en el Departamento de Estudios Internacionales y Políticas de la Universidad de Cambridge. Cristina es además en la actualidad directora MPhil, Master of Philosophy, en Política Pública en la Universidad de Cambridge, entre otros cargos como ser miembro del Queen's College de Cambridge o investigadora asociada al Instituto Bennett para Políticas Públicas. Formada en la Universidad de Castilla-La Mancha y doctora en Economía por el CSIC, tiene un brillante currículum con premios y calificaciones summa cum laude y amplísima experiencia en investigación en temas relacionados con la economía, el medio ambiente, las políticas públicas, la innovación, con un enfoque en la evaluación de instrumentos de política que permitan la transición hacia economía neutra en carbono. Hola, Cristina. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Es un privilegio contar contigo también para esta sesión.
Muchas gracias a vosotros por la invitación. El placer es mío. ¿Se me escucha bien?
Perfectamente. Bueno, tenemos una serie de preguntas preparadas para ti, para que sirva un poco de guión conductor. El primero, por supuesto, pues es enlazar la COP anterior con la futura. ¿Cuáles son, crees, los principales hitos conseguidos en la última COP de Glasgow y cómo hemos avanzado desde entonces en su consecución en temas de ambición climática y otros de financiación?
En este sentido, la COP26 fue un evento que generó mucha divergencia en temas de opinión respecto a si fue un éxito o no lo fue. Más específicamente en términos de evidencia, la COP26 de Glasgow fue la más productiva desde la conferencia de París en términos de adopción de decisiones formales. En Glasgow se adoptaron más de 50 decisiones formales y sirvió un poco como escenario para el anuncio de nuevos compromisos de políticas públicas por parte tanto de gobiernos como en este caso de otros stakeholders en los días previos a la cumbre de los líderes y a la conferencia en sí misma. Al final de lo que fue la primera semana de Glasgow se habían ya recibido actualizaciones de las contribuciones, Nationally Determined Contributions, perdón por mi inglés, me sale más fácil en inglés, de 151 de los países y se habían declarado nuevos objetivos para alcanzar economías neutras en carbono, sobre todo bueno, en gases de efecto invernadero, pero sobre todo en CO2 para 2050. Por tanto, uno de los logros más concretos, yo creo, de Glasgow fue la revisión por parte de los países de revisar y fortalecer los objetivos para 2030 y alinearlos con ese objetivo de limitar la temperatura a 1,5 que se incluyó en el Acuerdo de París. También otro de los logros fue empujar que para finales del próximo año, o sea, para finales de antes cuando digo próximo año de la próxima COP, aquellos que no lo habrían hecho, que no habrían entregado sus Nationally Determined Contributions, tenían que presentar al menos formalmente estas y asegurarse de que su participación reflejara un incremento en los objetivos. Esto fue importante el término de una nueva declaración asociada con el aprendizaje, se llamaba Aprendizaje para nuestro planeta, Acción Climática, en la traducción al español, que compromete a los países para la COP27 a revisar el progreso en relación a los compromisos que acababan de hacer. Otro de los logros, diría, de la COP de Glasgow y del Glasgow Climate Pact, que es el documento que al final sintetiza la mayoría de los logros y el acuerdo, consolidó el 1,5 grados centígrados como techo de objetivo de temperatura global principal sobre el tradicional 2 grados centígrados. En el acuerdo en sí mismo se nombra 4 veces el objetivo de 1,5, mientras que solo se nombra el objetivo de 2 grados 2 veces. Y se enfatizan, por tanto, los impactos también más severos asociados a quedarnos en un objetivo de 2 grados con respecto a quedarnos en un objetivo de 1,5. Hubo otros dos, yo diría, pasos muy interesantes. El primero y más significativo, aunque más simbólico y que generó muchísimo drama en las negociaciones, en las últimas horas de las negociaciones antes de la clausura de la COP26, es la mención explícita a los combustibles fósiles, sin incluir el gas y sin incluir el petróleo, pero se menciona explícitamente la necesidad de cortar los combustibles fósiles y se menciona el fin de los subsidios ineficientes para estos. Esta es la primera vez que esto pasa en uno de los acuerdos. Y finalmente, el último punto que yo consideraría importante fue las negociaciones en torno al artículo 6. del Acuerdo de París sobre la cooperación voluntaria entre partes, que incluye el uso e implementación de mercados de carbono, que finalmente consiguió sentar las bases. No hasta el punto necesario, pero se consiguió avanzar en una regulación y en un rulebook de las negociaciones en cuanto a los mecanismos voluntarios para el establecimiento de mercados de CO2. Esos son los puntos que yo diría fueron los más importantes en la COP26 en Glasgow.
Gracias, Cristina. No sé si tenías preparadas unas slides y no sé si las tenías que pasar tú o tenemos que pasarlas aquí. Entonces...
No, las puedo pasar, pero como estaba un poco en la temática, era un poco para mostrar que tenemos la evidencia claramente de que no estamos haciendo las cosas bien. En esta particular slide lo que pretendía era mostrar cuándo, de hecho, las COPs empezaron, cuándo somos conscientes del problema y que actualmente, durante los últimos 30 años de negociaciones, no hemos hecho lo que deberíamos hacer, no hemos hecho los deberes en estas negociaciones. La temperatura sigue incrementándose, tenemos muchísima evidencia científica a día de hoy, ya no solo con modelos de predicción que podemos pensar o no pueden ser más o menos adecuados en predecir lo que va a pasar con el futuro del clima, pero también evaluación de políticas ex ante y evaluación de impactos que claramente nos dice ya que tenemos problemas y que como no resolvamos estos problemas vamos a afrontar unos costes en el futuro que van a ser mucho mayores de lo que la inversión en energías renovables y en estrategias contra el cambio climático nos van a generar a día de hoy. Y básicamente esta slide la voy a dejar ahí un poco para que se vea que no estamos donde tenemos que estar de momento.
La verdad es que esta nos asusta, la vemos pero intentamos pasar rápido cuando llegamos a ella. Te queremos preguntar un poco por Sharm el Sheikh. ¿Cómo lo ves? ¿Cómo crees que se enfoca? ¿Qué avances o bloqueos puedes esperar en relación a lo que ya nos ha mencionado de los fondos de pérdidas y daños o de algunas alianzas tipo el Just Energy Transition Partnerships entre Sudáfrica, la Unión Europea, el Reino Unido y la Unión Europea para limitar o acelerar el cierre de plantas de carbón en Sudáfrica? ¿Qué es lo que crees cómo puede pasar Sharm el Sheikh?
Después de Glasgow sí que hubo, digamos, 3 temas principales que están pendientes en la agenda. Y esos temas principales pendientes en la agenda son los que desde mi punto de vista serán claves en el futuro de la negociación, no solo en la COP de Egipto, no solo en la COP27, sino en las siguientes. Los temas claves son la adaptación, como bien habéis mencionado ya, las pérdidas y daños y la financiación y el objetivo de financiación por parte de los países desarrollados en países en desarrollo. Estos temas ya fueron muy importantes, muy contenciosos durante la COP26 y las negociaciones y discusiones sobre esto siguen a un ritmo muy lento, demasiado lento. Van a estar en el centro del debate en Sharm el Sheikh, pero es algo que deberíamos mirar porque, como ha mencionado Sara antes, el objetivo de financiación es en sí mismo no lo estamos cumpliendo desde el punto de vista de los países en desarrollo hacia los desarrollados hacia los en desarrollo, pero no solo esto, es que es un poco migajas con respecto a la cantidad de inversión que vamos a necesitar en estos contextos. El Glasgow fue o es integral en su cobertura de nuevos planes de trabajo, de nuevas guías, de mitigación, de adaptación, de pérdidas de daños, de financiamiento, pero claramente refleja la falta de cumplimiento con respecto a esto que hemos dicho, a los compromisos de financiación por parte de países desarrollados a países en vías de desarrollo, y estableció una moratoria, porque no cumplimos con los objetivos, hasta 2025 para cumplir con el objetivo de proporcionar los 100 billones americanos al año hasta 2020. Muchos países en desarrollo se han sentido, digamos, decepcionados por los limitados avances en este tema, por limitados avances más concretos en términos de cómo se va a hacer, en términos de adaptación y en términos de pérdida de daños. Y ha sido una de las razones, en particular esta última pérdida las pérdidas y daños en Glasgow, se convirtió en uno de los máximos problemas en Glasgow para retrasar el acuerdo, que se llegó solo al final y casi cuando ya no había tiempo. Estas decisiones tomadas en Glasgow, en estos tres temas, van a ser, como digo, el frente de las negociaciones en Sharm el Sheikh, sobre todo acompañados con una nueva negociación más allá de los 100 billones de dólares por año. De acuerdo con el cronograma, esto tiene que ponerse, o sea, la meta para un nuevo acuerdo con respecto a esto sería para 2024, pero se cuestiona ahora mismo hasta qué punto el nuevo proceso, las nuevas negociaciones representan un progreso significativo o no, y brindan o no una ventana de oportunidad para un enfoque más serio en cuanto a las necesidades de estos países en desarrollo y en cuanto a los impactos que ya estamos viendo y al empeoramiento de los impactos climáticos. El Glasgow Climate Pact a mí me resulta divertido a veces cuando lo leo, con toda la tristeza que genera, cuando empieza a decir expresamos un profundo pesar por el fracaso de la financiación, el profundo pesar, pero vamos a hacer algo. El Glasgow Climate Pact presentó o instó a los países desarrollados a cumplir con urgencia con este objetivo. Se presentó una moratoria hasta 2025, cuando entrará en vigor la nueva financiación, el nuevo sistema de financiación que se está negociando. Problema: que los países desarrollados están retrocediendo en la asignación, sobre todo en cuanto a lo que consideramos pérdidas y daños, y están un poco nerviosos de que el lenguaje que se introduzca en las negociaciones internacionales abran la puerta a reclamos relacionados con compensación en torno a las responsabilidades históricas de determinados países en cuanto a la generación de problemas asociados al cambio climático. Los países en desarrollo, en el grupo de negociación en el G77, y China salieron de las conversaciones ya muy decepcionados en Glasgow por el tema de esta financiación y de este financiamiento asociado a pérdidas y daños. Y las negociaciones en Bonn en junio no fueron como se esperaban, no han ido hacia mejor, y yo preveo un potencial bloqueo en términos del lenguaje jurídico en cuanto al fondo para pérdidas y daños en Egipto. Este va a ser un tema contencioso muy importante durante las próximas COPs desde mi punto de vista.
Bueno, Cristina, pasando ya a los grandes emisores, ¿qué papel podemos esperar de los grandes emisores que han presentado recientemente sus actualizaciones a sus National Determined Contributions? ¿Serán efectivos el Pacto Verde Europeo o el Inflation Reduction Act de Estados Unidos? ¿Crees que ayudarán a aumentar la confianza en el sistema de negociaciones internacionales?
Bueno, creo que como acabo de mencionar en cuanto a los grandes emisores, las conversaciones no han avanzado demasiado en Bonn, en la conferencia en junio, y ya surgieron muchos puntos de discordia, sobre todo relacionado con el lenguaje que acabas de mencionar tú, grandes emisores o emisores principales, en el que, por ejemplo, Estados Unidos insistió para obligar a determinados países como China a asumir una mayor responsabilidad en la reducción de gases de efecto invernadero durante esta década, entre 2020 y 2030, y sin embargo China y países como India, por ejemplo, o Arabia Saudí, se han opuesto al lenguaje, de hecho, para mostrar esta responsabilidad histórica de países como Estados Unidos en las consecuencias relacionadas con el cambio climático. Grandes emisores. Bueno, lo que sabemos a día de hoy es que las conversaciones entre Estados Unidos y China se han suspendido, y las reuniones bilaterales entre estos dos países, por ejemplo, están canceladas, y a esto obviamente hay que sumar las tensiones que genera pues, la guerra entre Ucrania y Rusia. Y en este sentido lo que hemos visto o lo que se ve en la documentación que los países ya están entregando es que a menos de 20 días de la COP en Egipto, solo 24 países han presentado Nationally Determined Contributions que sean nuevas, que estén revisadas o que hayan sido actualizadas. Este es el mapa que había justo antes de la COP26. Ahora vemos que estos 24 países son los únicos que han presentado nuevas Nationally Determined Contributions y no todas, de hecho la gran mayoría de los países que han presentado esta actualización no han respondido a este llamado reforzamiento o fortalecimiento de los objetivos y de las Nationally Determined Contributions que Glasgow hizo y que he mencionado al principio de mi intervención. Esto incluye al anfitrión, Egipto, no ha reforzado las Nationally Determined Contributions. Esto incluye la presidencia saliente de COP, esto incluye al Reino Unido, y Australia es el único país que ha aumentado un poquito la ambición con respecto a la COP26. Estados Unidos, el Inflation Reduction Act, han presentado una legislación importante para apoyar la acción climática a través de esta nueva ley, pero esta nueva ley solo conducirá a una reducción del 40% en las emisiones y hace falta cerrar la brecha entre el 50 y 52% para 2030, que no queda reflejado en estas nuevas contribuciones. Entonces, hay camino que hacer porque tenemos los objetivos, sabemos lo que pasa con los objetivos, sabemos que no son suficientes los objetivos y ahora obviamente es el momento de estos grandes emisores qué pueden hacer desde el punto de vista no de la implementación, lo que estamos diciendo, y no solo de la implementación de políticas a nivel internacional o lo que se negocie en las negociaciones internacionales, pero qué se puede hacer para implementar políticas públicas a nivel nacional que nos permitan, o nacional, regional o local, que nos permitan cerrar esa brecha y fortalecer los objetivos y lograr la reducción que realmente necesitamos. El objetivo está perfectamente establecido, necesitamos más ambición, pero necesitamos ir allí de alguna manera y ahora es el momento de qué es o en qué manera vamos a llegar a esta meta.
Bueno, unas palabras, solo brevemente dinos qué opinas que una vez concluido el libro de reglas del Acuerdo de París y se pasa a la implementación, ¿cuál crees que puede ser el futuro de las negociaciones climáticas internacionales en esta situación?
Pues hay mucho debate, ¿no?, entre multilateralismo, minilateralismo, y desde mi punto de vista, y lo dejaré aquí, parece claro que las negociaciones internacionales son necesarias, pero realmente son insuficientes para empujar a la velocidad que necesitamos la acción contra el cambio climático. Parece que lleváramos 30 años discutiendo, creo que lo he mencionado antes, ¿no?, terminología legal, en lugar de tomar la evidencia científica y darnos cuenta que según la investigación que tenemos, no hay tiempo. Necesitamos una implementación de políticas ya y necesitamos o sabemos que esta implementación permitirá ahorrar dinero a la larga. En la última investigación de mis colegas de Oxford, en el Institute for New Economic Thinking, han concluido que se espera que la transición a un sistema de energía descarbonizado en 2050 nos ahorre al menos 12 trillones en comparación con continuar con los actuales niveles de uso de combustibles fósiles. Si para esto necesitamos la existencia de instituciones complementarias a las negociaciones, como los clubes climáticos, esa es otra historia. Mi premisa inicial es que la acción global no se ha implementado de manera efectiva, ya que depende del consenso de muchos actores. La reducción de esta dependencia de mecanismos multilaterales en negociaciones internacionales puede influir, obviamente, al mayor logro de objetivos y sostenibilidad, pero necesitamos una complementariedad de instituciones que sean capaces de poner en marcha la regulación, que sean capaces de poner en marcha las leyes, que sean capaces de poner en marcha los acuerdos. Y esto puede incluir clubes climáticos. No tenemos demasiada investigación sobre si son mejores o peores, y esto puede incluir, como he mencionado antes, trabajar claramente con jurisdicciones regionales y locales que tengan en cuenta las necesidades de los diferentes contextos. Un club climático como el propuesto por el G7 podría negociar objetivos de una manera más fácil o más eficiente o más fuerte, sí, pero tienen dificultades en lidiar con desigualdades o con problemas de redistribución al final del día, y también tienen problemas asociados a legitimidad internacional. No serían un sustitutivo, en mi opinión, de lo que viene a ser una negociación internacional, pero pueden actuar como complementarios si se les da la posibilidad de avanzar más fuertemente en objetivos o en implementación. Un ejemplo, por ejemplo, sería en Glasgow se puso en marcha el Breakthrough Agenda para fomentar la innovación y la inversión en tecnologías limpias, y esto se firmó por 44 países. Si hay países que se ponen de acuerdo en hacer o en establecer medidas, pactos o iniciativas que fomenten el incremento de la inversión en tecnologías necesarias para la descarbonización, adelante. Pero yo no creo que sean un sustitutivo per se, sino más bien un complemento.
Gracias, Cristina. Ya la última pregunta, y te rogamos que seas breve, por favor.
Vale.
Hablamos, ya lo ha sido en todo, la verdad es que ejemplar. Es sobre el rol de las empresas. Partiendo de la plataforma Nazca, en la que se recogen desde el 14 los compromisos climáticos de entidades no estatales, ¿qué elementos podrían reforzar la rendición de cuentas de las empresas con respecto a sus compromisos climáticos? ¿Qué opinas de las iniciativas como los Corporate Determined Contributions?
Este tema es muy importante porque yo soy de la opinión, en mi opinión, necesitamos obviamente mucha mayor participación y colaboración público-privada en este sentido, sobre todo para generar crowding effects relacionados con financiación y con inversión. La plataforma Nazca en particular es un sitio maravilloso para proporcionar información en cuanto a acciones climáticas en todo el mundo. Ahora mismo creo que hay alrededor de 30.000 actores poniendo en marcha medidas climáticas que aparecen en la plataforma, y claramente, como digo, si queremos intensificar los objetivos, vamos a requerir más colaboración público-privada. Hasta la fecha, las COPs no han optimizado esta colaboración entre responsables políticos y las empresas, pero será crucial para lograr los objetivos impuestos. En este sentido, contribuciones corporativas, contribuciones determinadas corporativas, para capturar el progreso y la entrega en relación a objetivos, ambiciones, adelante, pero se necesita un marco común de medidas. Esto puede venir dado por taxonomías como la que habéis discutido de la Unión Europea. Necesitamos métricas de evaluación y objetivos que se alineen con los objetivos a nivel nacional, que seamos capaces de, bueno, en qué están avanzando las empresas, qué medidas han tomado y cómo estas avanzan en los objetivos que se han identificado a nivel nacional. Necesitamos que estas Corporate Determined Contributions sean transparentes, que sean medibles, y que de esta manera podamos movernos de acciones que realmente significan un paso hacia los objetivos climáticos de lo que se puede considerar greenwashing.
Bueno, Cristina, muchísimas gracias por tu intervención, y además casualmente la vicepresidenta ha llegado para oír tu última respuesta. Estoy seguro que le habrá encantado. Llegamos ya a la sección de cierre y van a intervenir Martin Veslar, el CEO de CEPSA, Juan José Ruiz, el presidente del Real Instituto del Cano, Mario Ruiz Tagle, presidente de ENERClub, y cerrará la vicepresidenta y ministra de Transición Ecológica y Reto Demográfico, Teresa Rivera.
Muchas gracias, Íñigo. Vicepresidenta tercera del Gobierno y ministra para la Transición Ecológica y Reto Demográfico, Teresa Rivera. Presidente del Club Español de la Energía, Mario Ruiz Tagle. presidente del Real Instituto Elcano, José Juan Luis Gómez, representantes del sector energético, queridos amigos y amigas. Es un honor para mí iniciar la clausura de esta jornada anual del Comité Español del Consejo Mundial de la Energía. Energy and Climate Futures, Europe After the Energy Crisis. También es un placer volver a acogerlos aquí, en nuestra casa. Nuestra puerta está siempre abierta para este tipo de iniciativas. Me gustaría, en primer lugar, dar las gracias a todos que nos acompañáis y los que nos veis en streaming a través de la pantalla. Y muchas gracias especialmente a todos los ponentes y los organizadores que han sido de un extraordinario nivel hoy. Es necesario apoyar este tipo de eventos, donde se abordan temas tan importantes como la respuesta de Europa a la actual crisis energética, el futuro del cambio climático y el diseño de las políticas energéticas en nuestro continente. Aquí el Club de la Energía hace un gran labor. Estamos en un momento histórico en el que la energía está en el centro de todos los cambios globales, en el centro del debate público y en el que los gobiernos y empresas deben ir de la mano, con las luces largas y buscando juntos escenarios realmente productivos. En mi opinión, debemos ver la actual crisis energética como una gran oportunidad para acelerar la transición energética. Debemos mantenernos fieles a nuestras ambiciones y compromisos de seguir progresando por este camino. Y no podemos ni pararla, ni dar marcha atrás. La situación actual de altos precios de energía ha llevado a la Unión Europea a tomar rápidas medidas a corto plazo para potenciar el ahorro energético y la garantía de suministro. Y esas medidas son completamente necesarias. Pero lo urgente no debe eclipsar lo importante. La gran transformación necesaria que tenemos por delante y que ya era prioritario antes del inicio de la guerra ucraniana. Debemos acelerar las inversiones en nuevas tecnologías, priorizar la descarbonización y garantir la independencia europea del suministro. Si bien es importante que la industria continúe descarbonizando sus propias operaciones, no debemos usar esta crisis para depender más de los hidrocarburos. Todos debemos contribuir para acelerar esta transición. Los gobiernos también. Para ello, necesitamos de las administraciones un enfoque europeo armonizado mediante el cual agilicemos los permisos y logremos mayor flexibilidad regulatoria para el desarrollo de las infraestructuras que nos permiten apostar por las nuevas alternativas. Necesitamos un marco regulatorio favorable, porque sin la regulación adecuada, España y Europa pueden perder el tren frente a otras regiones o potencias. La regulación y el contexto económico nos tienen que incentivar y no poner trabas. Es importante en que en Europa rememos todos juntos y que las regulaciones y las medidas impositivas que afectan al sector están alineados en diseño de intensidad en todos los territorios. Y que, por supuesto, dichas medidas nos asfixien a la hora de acometer la gran transformación que estamos realizando las empresas energéticas. La transición ecológica es una fuente de oportunidades y de progreso. En CEPSA, como algunos de vosotros ya conocéis, estamos ya trabajando en nuestra ambiciosa estrategia Positive Motion, que supone una transformación radical para ser una empresa más sostenible y verde, lo que a larga hará posible una energía más barata para la población y facilitará la descarbonización. Bajo un claro propósito, transformar la energía y la movilidad para entre todos mejorar el mundo, aspiramos a que al finales de la década seamos líderes en hidrógeno verde y biocombustibles, con plantas industriales las más competitivas. Entre todos debemos dotar de una mayor autonomía estratégica a España y Europa. Y CEPSA pondrá de su parte en ello. Concluyendo, las grandes colaboraciones son necesarias para llevar a cabo la transición energética y garantizar un suministro energético seguro e independiente. Impulsemos juntos proyectos productivos y con un retorno no solo en términos de transición energética, sino también económicos y de creación de empleo que beneficien a todo el conjunto. Aprovechemos esta oportunidad histórica para ser protagonistas y actores clave para promover energías sostenibles, asequibles y accesibles. Creemos juntos un futuro mejor para todos. Muchas gracias de nuevo a todos por estar hoy aquí con nosotros. Le cedo la palabra al presidente del Real Instituto Elcano, José Juan Ruiz.
Vicepresidenta, Martín, Mario, patronos del Real Instituto Elcano, ambos, señoras, señores, es un enorme placer estar hoy aquí en estas jornadas, mostrando una vez más el compromiso que el Real Instituto Elcano tiene sobre los temas de energía y clima. Es uno de los ejes prioritarios de nuestra agenda de investigación. Y permítame que en público agradezca el excepcional trabajo que nuestros dos investigadores, Lara y Gonzalo, están haciendo en este área para consolidarlo. Hablar de la COP, de los retos que tenemos, a veces produce melancolía, porque todos y cada uno de nosotros sabemos las dificultades que todo tiene este proceso. Pero probablemente sería injusto desligar lo que está ocurriendo en la economía mundial, en la geopolítica mundial, de esa conferencia que se va a celebrar en Egipto el 7 y el 8 de noviembre. Por un lado, yo creo que lo que ha ocurrido nos ha puesto a todos cada vez más frente a los hechos de la realidad del cambio climático y la necesidad de avanzar en el control y la lucha contra el cambio climático. Por otro lado, sería ingenuo pensar que no hay dudas, y algunas de ellas razonables a la vista del comportamiento de algunos de los agentes, de que la situación actual va a hacer más difícil o más complicada el seguir haciendo avances. Por eso es tan importante que ante la conferencia tengamos todos muy claro cuáles son los costes, cuáles son los beneficios de no avanzar y cuáles son las ideas que realmente están en discusión y sobre las que deberíamos de estar, estarán seguramente las autoridades y las empresas que estén en la conferencia deberían estar dando respuesta. ¿Dónde estamos? Pues Cristina ha hecho una magnífica exposición en la intervención anterior. En términos de mitigación, claramente los compromisos son insuficientes. Deberíamos reducir las emisiones en un 45% en el 2030 frente a las del 2010, un 43% versus la del 2019 según el panel de expertos. Y el análisis que tenemos de noviembre del 2021 lo que nos indica es que en 2030, si no hay cambios, las emisiones serán un 14% mayores que lo que eran en el 2010. Y esta es la realidad. La realidad es que los grandes emisores no han presentado sus compromisos, los National Determined Contribution, como se comprometieron en Glasgow, y realmente es una situación que a todos nos debería de preocupar. Hay buenas noticias. Yo creo que tanto en Estados Unidos como en Europa, con aproximaciones muy distintas, el Fit 55 de la Unión Europea y la propuesta del IRA, el Inflation Reduction Act y el Infrastructure Program de Biden, creo que ponen sobre la mesa probablemente objetivos más ambiciosos, con ideas y mecanismos distintos, no sé si mutuamente consistentes, pero probablemente podemos esperar algo de los países más desarrollados, los que están tirando, digamos, de estos esfuerzos. En términos de adaptación, lo saben perfectamente, tenemos que seguir avanzando en el establecimiento del objetivo global de adaptación y en su medición. Todo lo que no midamos realmente no va a mantener el momentum que es necesario para seguir avanzando. Y en términos de financiación, todos somos conscientes de que es uno de los temas más espinosos y uno de los temas más difíciles de resolver. En cuanto a financiación climática internacional, nos habíamos comprometido los países desarrollados a aportar 100.000 millones de dólares al año a los países en desarrollo a partir del 2020. En estos momentos la estimación del gap está en el torno de los 15.000 millones, estamos por debajo, con lo cual hay que hacer un esfuerzo adicional y, sobre todo, pensar en qué es lo que ocurre a partir del 2025. Tenemos que mejorar la financiación para la adaptación. En la COP del 26 se adquirió el compromiso de duplicar la financiación para la adaptación en el 2025 con respecto a lo del 2019 y sería tremendamente tranquilizador tener planes más concretos. Y tenemos que cerrar la brecha de la inversión. Yo creo que esto es uno de los puntos centrales en los que probablemente la discusión del cambio climático tiene que comenzar a tener una dimensión más macroeconómica, más de equilibrio general, porque realmente a la gente le cuesta mucho trabajo algo que para todos los que estáis involucrados en el proceso es obvio, que la mayor palanca de crecimiento hacia el futuro es la inversión en energías limpias y que sin energías limpias no hay crecimiento. Tendríamos que estar invirtiendo entre 3 y 6 veces el nivel hasta el año 2030 para poder avanzar en el proceso. Estamos muy lejos de eso y sobre todo estamos mucho más lejos si nuestro objetivo no son los 2 grados, sino el 1,5 grados que ha sugerido el Pacto del Clima de Glasgow. Tenemos que atender temas como la financiación para las pérdidas y los daños o concluir los detalles del libro de reglas del Acuerdo de París. Yo quiero desde aquí decir que en Elcano estamos siguiendo esto con muchísima atención, estamos absolutamente al servicio de las preguntas y de lo que podamos hacer desde el Instituto, porque esto, además de un problema climático, de un problema macroeconómico, es un problema de ideas. Y la gestión de las ideas, la producción de ideas que puedan ser útiles para tomar decisiones prácticas, están ahí. Recuerden lo que dijo Keynes. Keynes dijo que todos los políticos son dependientes de algún economista muerto. Lo que queremos, los que estamos en Elcano, es que la gente entienda nuestras ideas y, si es posible, que los que nos dedicamos en Elcano a estos temas sigamos estando vivos y apoyando con toda nuestra fuerza este proceso. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Muchas gracias a todos.
Querida vicepresidenta tercera, Teresa Rivera, consejero delegado de CEP San Martín, muchas gracias por la invitación. Querido presidente de SECME, Íñigo Díaz de Espada, presidente del Instituto Elcano, muchas gracias por tu presentación y tu visión siempre optimista de lo que se nos viene, a pesar de las estadísticas. Queridos amigos y gente del mundo energético, los desafíos que tenemos, como siempre, son gigantes y es un placer poder participar en esta jornada del tradicional evento del Comité Español del Consejo Mundial de la Energía. Tener la oportunidad de pronunciar unas palabras en esta sesión de clausura y en esta también excelente compañía. Gracias a ti, Martín, nuevamente por la invitación, por acogernos en esta casa y por dar un ejemplo de que todo tipo de compañías tenemos mucho que aportar en la transición energética. Es un proceso que, como más adelante explicaré, afortunadamente tiene espacio para todos, no necesitamos pelearnos. Y tercero, también agradecer a ti, José Juan, por la visión que has impuesto en el Real Instituto Elcano de traernos el aporte científico y la visión con el conocimiento que necesitamos para encontrar los mejores caminos de acelerar este proceso de transición. Y por supuesto, gracias a SECME por hacer posible estas jornadas. Querida ministra, sabemos los momentos que está viviendo y también creo que se merece unas muchas gracias por estar aquí y acompañarnos hoy día en este cierre. Hoy nos hemos reunido en un momento tremendamente significativo para el mundo energético. Creo que no se podían juntar peores condiciones. El COVID, una crisis energética, un conflicto con nuestra situación climática, unas perspectivas de reducir la actividad de la economía, y que, como todos sabemos, esa macroeconomía está basada en la suma de nuestras confianzas, con lo cual hay que poner un poco más de optimismo para poder salir de este choque energético y poder superar las secuelas que tenemos tanto en inflación como en los movimientos de las tasas de interés. Tal vez porque Europa, y tenga una especial situación por su particular cercanía con el conflicto y con la dependencia energética de Rusia es que nos hayamos colocado particularmente en el epicentro de este shock energético. Claramente, como respuesta, ya lo veníamos haciendo y por eso entendemos que es lo más rápido, lo más fácil y lo más factible. Nos vemos obligados a acelerar el proceso de descarbonización de la economía, de todos los sistemas energéticos, y hacerlos aferrándonos más que nunca a lo que sabemos hacer, a los grandes vértices del trilema energético, la seguridad energética fundamentalmente y la accesibilidad también a la energía. Sabemos que es un proceso complejo, pero hay condiciones básicas que debemos tener muy presentes y algunas de las cuales creo que no se han mencionado o poco en las sesiones de hoy. Me referiré, en primer lugar, a la transición energética como un proceso y no como un destino específicamente, con múltiples caminos por recorrer, y eso es importante porque es lo que permite que todos tengan su espacio, que requiere de miles de millones de pasos, donde cada uno puede hacer su aporte, y es esa suma de aportes la que va a cambiar las estadísticas que recién nos mostraban. Sea cual sea el camino que cada uno elija, que vayamos todos en la misma dirección. Es imprescindible encontrar también un equilibrio adecuado. De los tres vértices del trilema que recién veíamos, de sostenibilidad, de seguridad y de accesibilidad a la energía. Por las circunstancias del momento también estas cosas como que se nos pierde el norte. Existe la tentación de revisar nuestra planificación a fin de ralentizar los avances en el proceso, pero en nuestra visión es claramente urgente acelerar las medidas. Lo que no se puede seguir es esperando, y creo que por la urgencia que tenemos en este proceso de descarbonización de la economía y de los factores productivos, es porque es la manera más clara, más directa y más cercana de poder realmente cambiar esas tendencias. Es una medida clara en que nos permite tener la seguridad y el acceso a los suministros energéticos. No perdamos nunca la visión de largo plazo, por muy duro que sea el corto y el medio plazo, por duras que sean las dificultades que temporalmente estamos enfrentando, y que lo que nos permita es pensar y generar con estos cambios una industria que sea tecnológicamente fuerte en el ámbito local para reducir nuestras dependencias, no solo de los suministros, sino también de los bienes y servicios que nos van a permitir avanzar en esta transición. Tampoco debemos buscar soluciones en que cambiemos de unas dependencias a otras, porque la historia, desgraciadamente, para ciertas cosas, se repite y con mucha frecuencia. Una industria local fuerte para el sector energético permitirá que España siga siendo pionera y potencia en el mundo y en Europa. Para avanzar en la transición y salir de la crisis que estamos atravesando, como segundo tema, creo que es imprescindible tener muy en consideración el factor humano. Y cuando hablamos de factor humano, lo hacemos desde distintos puntos de vista. Por un lado, el empleo y los profesionales del sector. La gran transformación y los retos que tenemos por delante requieren de muchos talentos. Claramente debemos anticiparnos y poner los medios necesarios para contar con este talento allí donde precisemos y cuando necesitemos. Es nuestra obligación mantener el atractivo del sector energético para atraer los mejores profesionales. La transición energética no será un camino fácil, no lo está haciendo, y necesita de personas con experiencia y también necesita personas con conocimientos profundos del sector y los impactos también que provocamos en la sociedad, tanto positivos como negativos. Por otro lado, al hablar del sector humano y del factor humano, tenemos que hacerlo también pensando en el consumidor, en el cliente y en los ciudadanos. Es fundamental que ellos entiendan lo que está pasando, el porqué de las medidas que estamos tomando y que se adoptan, qué objetivos se buscan con esas medidas, dar oportunidades para que puedan contribuir también ellos a las soluciones y también en alcanzar los objetivos. Para conseguirlo, sin duda, es muy importante la comunicación, que todos utilicemos un lenguaje común, un lenguaje empático y que sea didáctico. La transparencia, la confianza y, por supuesto, la educación a todos los niveles son fundamentales en estos momentos de crisis. Cuando hablamos de energía, todo el mundo es un stakeholder, desde los niños en los colegios, las familias, los empresarios y el mundo político. Reitero que la educación sobre la situación energética actual es fundamental para entender el proceso de hoy y entender las soluciones que podremos construir para el mañana. Sin duda que ante un contexto económico como el de hoy, la protección de los consumidores vulnerables es, sin lugar a duda, una prioridad. También lo son nuestras industrias, también lo son nuestros clientes, pero también deben serlo nuestras empresas, sin perder de vista la importancia siempre de incentivar el ahorro energético y la eficiencia energética. Por último, creo que debemos tratar de ver la crisis como una oportunidad, y eso sí que se ha hablado aquí, y yo quiero ser parte de ese discurso, de entender que tenemos una gran oportunidad de contar por fin en la Unión Europea con una política energética común e integrada, que construya más Europa y que tenga una visión más integradora y global. Una gran oportunidad que puede convertir a España en el referente de la transición energética y también de la descarbonización de la economía, siguiendo la ruta que veníamos recorriendo hasta ahora. Una oportunidad que, si aprovechamos bien, podemos ayudarnos a construir más industria, con mejor tecnología y con mejores empleos. Las empresas del sector estamos preparadas para apoyar este proceso. El desafío es la creación de los marcos regulatorios que sean estables lo máximo posible, que sean predecibles lo máximo posible y que sean incentivadores. Y esto sí que es una exigencia, porque el mundo hoy competirá por energías baratas, para atraer los proyectos y las inversiones que sean necesarias. El éxito que tengamos en cualquiera de estos 3 puntos, en el equilibrio en el trilema, en el factor humano y en la oportunidad, va a depender en gran medida de la colaboración que tengamos en todos los niveles, sociedad, mundo político y el mundo industrial. A nivel europeo, deberemos seguir trabajando unidos para garantizar que las medidas de todos los gobiernos estén alineadas, que refuercen el enfoque conjunto de la transición energética y de un mercado único y común para toda Europa en energía. Debemos ir a la próxima COP27 demostrando al mundo que, a pesar de las dificultades, el motor de la transición no se para, sino todo lo contrario, vamos a acelerar nuestra velocidad de crucero. Estoy seguro que con todos los esfuerzos, con el liderazgo que en esta materia ha demostrado nuestra vicepresidenta y ministra Teresa Rivera, lo vamos a conseguir. Para concluir, me gustaría recordar que el año próximo tenemos una cita clave en nuestra agenda. España tendrá la presidencia de la Unión Europea durante el segundo semestre y desde el cual el club nos gustaría apoyar y ser actores activos y útiles. Por lo que desde aquí nos ofrecemos una vez más para desarrollar actividades ligadas a la misma que puedan ser de mucho interés. Muchas gracias a todos y creo que, incluyendo también un saludo a los excelentes expositores que hemos tenido hoy día, debemos tener una jornada en donde salgamos un poco más optimistas del trabajo que tenemos por delante. Muchas gracias a todos. Ministra, por favor.
Íñigo, presidente de la sección española del Comité Mundial de la Energía, queridos Martín, José Juan y Mario, representantes directamente de la Casa Anfitriona y de las aportaciones del Instituto Elcano y del Club Español de la Energía, queridos expositores, queridos amigos, es para mí una gran satisfacción y un gran honor estar con vosotros en estos minutos de clausura después de una jornada que seguro que ha sido apasionante y a la que solo he llegado al final, a escuchar esas palabras de ánimo contando cuáles son algunas de las herramientas disponibles para todos, según nos recordaba Cristina. Creo que es un momento apasionante. Yo empezaría diciendo que si no somos capaces de sacar las lecciones adecuadas en este año 2022 es que somos profundamente torpes. Esas referencias al trilema energético a las que antes aludía Mario cuando hablaba de seguridad de suministro, cuando hablaba seguridad energética, incluido seguridad de suministro, evidentemente, cuando hablaba de la incidencia económica, a lo que enseguida añadimos incidencia social e incidencia ambiental, han estallado delante de nuestros ojos. Se ha cuestionado en Europa la seguridad misma de abastecimiento. Evidentemente ha tenido un impacto dramático desde el punto de vista de la incidencia que ha tenido para la economía, no solamente los precios de la energía, su impacto como sector enormemente sistémico para el conjunto de nuestras actividades, pero también para el bienestar de las familias, generando, si no lo remediamos, una desigualdad y un impacto social regresivo enormemente importante, y se ha puesto en cuestión hasta qué punto estábamos dispuestos o no a acertar en el diagnóstico de cuál es la respuesta adecuada en relación con el ritmo de la transformación de nuestro sistema energético y el impacto ambiental que puedan tener nuestras decisiones. Ha sido un año enormemente intenso desde el punto de vista de la incidencia en las cuestiones energéticas, pero también ha sido enormemente representativo de lo que significa no actuar en materia de clima. Más de 40 días de récords en ola de calor, con noches tropicales como nunca habíamos vivido, con una sequía histórica que ha puesto en cuestión no solamente el sistema eléctrico, con un desplome sin precedentes en materia de generación hidroeléctrica en el conjunto de la península ibérica, con el cuestionamiento de la seguridad energética de una planta ya de por sí en estado un poquito complicado en Francia, con dificultades para la refrigeración de las centrales térmicas y nucleares, con dificultades para el transporte marítimo a través de los ríos, con dificultades en tantos y tantos frentes que muestran hasta qué punto la correcta conexión entre impactos del cambio climático o seguridad energética es mucho más fuerte de lo que hubiéramos podido imaginar. Por eso, si queremos reducir vulnerabilidad, tenemos que pensar en cómo acelerar la transformación de nuestro sistema energético. Si queremos pensar en cómo combatir el cambio climático, tenemos que pensar en la aceleración de la transformación de nuestro sistema energético. Si queremos contar con precios estables, predecibles, si queremos reducir la huella que pueda tener en la economía doméstica un sistema que pueda estar sometido a semejante volatilidad, tenemos que acelerar la transformación de nuestro sistema energético. Y eso nos ha obligado a pensar rápidamente en cuál es el horizonte temporal de medio y largo plazo del que no nos debemos desviar, pero también rápidamente, con agilidad, cuáles son las medidas en el corto plazo que nos hagan llegar a ese horizonte temporal de medio y largo plazo. Es obvio que tiene que ser coherente, es obvio que requiere ser flexible. Y afortunadamente Europa contaba con un análisis previo enormemente solvente. Hay que recordar que el mandato de esta comisión se inició con esa propuesta de contar con un pacto verde europeo. Continuó con una respuesta a la depresión que generó la COVID y sus limitaciones en cuanto a la actividad ordinaria, con un choque de inversión pensando en las generaciones futuras y acelerando aquellos cambios que entendíamos que eran imprescindibles y que nos dejaban en mejor situación desde el punto de vista industrial, económico, desde el punto de vista de la ganancia y de las soluciones que requieren las futuras generaciones. Por tanto, prestando particular atención también a la transformación del sistema energético. Y también es cierto que, a pesar de todas las dudas y todas las preocupaciones que generaban movimientos en torno a los precios del gas desde hace más de un año, el estallido del conflicto, de la invasión de Ucrania por parte de Putin en marzo, nos puso de manifiesto hasta qué punto podíamos ser vulnerables con una dependencia tan elevada del exterior, tan concentrada en un único actor y con tan poco adelanto en la transformación, en la modernización, en la integración, en la visión de conjunto de una política energética europea que hasta ahora solamente había sido muy parcial y muy discreta. Yo creo que esto ha sido una de las lecciones más interesantes y coincido con todos aquellos que habéis destacado que es en efecto una oportunidad. Es una situación que probablemente coloca a Europa en uno de los momentos de mayor presión, de mayor tensión y de mayor desafío. El proyecto europeo requiere coherencia en la respuesta y tiene ante sí la oportunidad de construir esa coherencia a través de las respuestas que requiere el sistema energético en este momento, a través de una profundización y de una comunitarización hasta donde sea posible de las políticas energéticas en el ámbito doméstico y en las dimensiones exteriores de la política energética. Y ha sido enormemente complejo, está siendo enormemente complejo, pero está siendo también enormemente constructivo y, ¿cómo decirlo?, estimulante el ver hasta qué punto, en situaciones de extrema dificultad, se ha mantenido, a pesar de todo, a un ritmo probablemente mucho más lento de lo que nos hubiera gustado en muchas de las respuestas que necesitábamos desde hace tiempo, esa voluntad de construcción unánime, esa voluntad de construcción unitaria, con dos premisas sumamente interesantes, que además nos encuentran muy bien posicionados. Cuando en un club, cuando en una sociedad compartida alguien necesita ayuda, hay que ayudar, porque a todos nos conviene que a los demás les vaya bien. Y muy probablemente esa solidaridad exige flexibilidad. Es cierto, exige flexibilidad. Nadie puede absorber la falta de disponibilidad de casi el 40% del gas que consume y un volumen muy representativo del carbón que consume, o del gasoil, o del diésel, de la gasolina y derivados de petróleo que se consumen. No es nada sencillo. Hace falta armar una respuesta urgente de emergencia, enormemente compleja, contando con todos los demás. Si no, el desastre está servido. Y ha sido esta la voluntad que ha inspirado toda nuestra acción, con algunas limitaciones importantes. Ofrecer un marco que dé cobertura a esa flexibilidad y a esa solidaridad no nos puede hacer perder de vista el horizonte de medio y largo plazo. Una cosa es flexibilidad, otra cosa es desviarse del camino. Una cosa es flexibilidad y otra cosa es imponer a quienes estamos en condiciones de seguir en nuestro camino reglas que dificultarían esa transformación, esa transición. Y en ese equilibrio complejo seguimos avanzando, con dos variables adicionales muy relevantes que explican mucho de lo, dentro de lo posible, esperado en lo inesperado. Y es prestar atención al impacto que una crisis como esta tiene en nuestros hogares y en nuestra economía. Europa no se puede levantar de la crisis energética sin tejido productivo. Europa no se puede permitir una respuesta que acabe generando pobreza energética generalizada, porque entonces sí, está en riesgo el proyecto europeo. Está en riesgo la supervivencia misma de la idea de Europa o la confianza en las instituciones. Por tanto, el equilibrio entre todas estas decisiones, el debate en torno a cómo repartir los costes de esta crisis, el debate en cómo dar respuesta en términos de seguridad, cómo apelar a un cambio cultural que necesita ser acelerado para incorporar esas premisas de consumo inteligente, producción inteligente, acelerar de la transformación, pero equidad en el reparto y garantía de cobertura a quienes más lo puedan necesitar, es fundamental. Esto es lo que hemos ido viendo en un despliegue probablemente sin precedentes. Quien esté acostumbrado a hacer un seguimiento de las decisiones, de los procesos de toma de decisión en Europa, lo constata inmediatamente. Los ciclos que antes eran de 10 años, ahora quizás son de 3 o de 4. Se prepara un libro blanco, se abre un debate, se prepara una propuesta, se debate. Se inicia una tramitación que acaba consiguiendo que 4 o 5 años después haya una directiva o un reglamento, nos han llevado a una situación insólita en la que prácticamente no hay mes en la que no aparezca un nuevo papel o una nueva propuesta. Y obviamente, desde el punto de vista del legislador, desde el punto de vista del rigor, de aquel que tiene por vocación tener normas perfectas, lo más perfectas posibles, es un poco, ¿cómo decirlo?, perturbador el tener que proceder de esta manera, pero creo que es capital el que hayamos podido seguir haciendo este recorrido y hayamos podido estar a la altura de las circunstancias. Insisto, todavía con muchos debates abiertos, porque la situación de partida es muy diferente. Y en esta ocasión, a España la encuentra bien situada. La encuentra bien situada con respecto al análisis de cuáles son las dificultades, las potencialidades, pero también con respecto a lo que ha sido la historia en la que por necesidad ha ido construyendo una diversificación de proveedores, una robustez en su sistema, un equilibrio muy importante en nuestros modos de producir y consumir energía, una visión anticipada también en la preparación de recursos humanos que nos permite dar saltos cualitativos muy notables, porque es cierto que desde el punto de vista estructural la mejor respuesta es acelerar la transformación, la mejor respuesta es facilitar una consolidación del proyecto europeo en torno a estos ejes, pero desde el punto de vista del futuro, todavía tenemos muchas oportunidades que ganar y, desde luego, muchas oportunidades que no perder en ningún caso. Quiero agradecer el compromiso de todos los actores corporativos, sociales, los reguladores, las instituciones. Nadie sobra, al contrario, todos necesitamos participar de un debate que nos permita canalizar el esfuerzo colectivo en ahorro y eficiencia, liberando recursos para los demás o para nosotros mismos, o incidiendo positivamente en una eventual reducción de precios medios y no solamente en nuestras facturas, liderando el debate sobre nuevas inversiones que permita anticipar en la buena dirección cosas que a lo mejor hubiéramos hecho dentro de unos años, pero que en este momento cuentan con un contexto que nos permite hacerlo sin ningún problema. Facilitando un debate sosegado, intelectualmente potente, seguro, que lleno de complejidades, de dificultades, de contradicciones, pero que con inteligencia debemos ser capaces de orientar. Debemos evitar generar confusión en las personas, debemos evitar alimentar el miedo cuando ciertamente la situación es desafiante, pero estamos en condiciones de poder responder adecuadamente. Hemos querido trasladar todas estas reflexiones en ese plan que hemos llamado Más Seguridad Energética, porque creemos que es importante decir que apostamos por más seguridad energética, no porque haya un problema de inseguridad, sino porque necesitamos reforzar nuestra seguridad. Y esta diferencia es clave, fundamental. Hay países en los que la gran preocupación es garantizar el acceso físico a la materia prima energética y en nuestro caso es asegurar que hacemos las cosas razonablemente bien, que aprovechamos las oportunidades y que hacemos llevadera esta crisis para el conjunto de las personas y de los actores industriales. Estamos en condiciones de hacerlo, creemos que debemos mostrar cómo hacerlo, creemos que las grandes empresas, además, estáis en condiciones de poder explicar cómo hacerlo, con vuestros propios planes de ahorro, hechos públicos, contando cómo se hacen las cosas, con vuestras propias capacidades de inversión, anticipando esas decisiones, con vuestro compromiso social. Estos días preguntaba mucho por qué pasa con las centralitas que están colapsadas. Hombre, es obvio que ha habido una avalancha de peticiones de cambio y probablemente eso requiera dimensionar las centralitas para poder acoger a tanta gente que en estos momentos se siente inquieta. Pero creo que estamos en condiciones colectivamente de poder hacerlo e individualmente de poder hacerlo. Nos quedan muchas cosas por hacer. Una de las satisfacciones que tuve ayer por la noche al aterrizar de Luxemburgo, después de un debate muy interesante en torno al hidrógeno, en torno a la solidaridad, en torno a cómo anticipar algunas de las cuestiones que son fundamentales o cómo limar asperezas con respecto a la preocupación sobre la disponibilidad de recursos si se introducen limitaciones u orientaciones a la capacidad de compra o al precio de compra del gas natural por parte de Europa. Decía que una de las satisfacciones fue constatar que uno de los ganadores de la subasta celebrada ayer había sido UNOSA. ¿Y por qué digo que para mí esto es importante? Porque en el proceso de transformación de nuestro sistema ya se nos ha olvidado, algunos no, porque habéis estado directamente implicados en ello, lo que representa para las comunidades de trabajadores o para las pequeñas comunidades territoriales cuyo progreso durante décadas ha estado ligado a una forma de generar bienestar y energía que hoy sabemos que tenía unos efectos secundarios nada positivos y que había que dejar atrás. Y el generar esperanza, el generar alternativas, el que estas personas se puedan sentir orgullosos por ellos y por sus antepasados, pero también con oportunidades por delante, es importante. Y sé que muchos de vosotros habéis tenido mucho que ver con la posibilidad de generar alternativas en estos territorios. Y me parece que, de nuevo, pone de manifiesto hasta qué punto la implicación y la satisfacción de poder contestar y de poder proveer servicios conjuntamente con un diálogo entre el sector público y el sector privado, con los actores locales, con los grandes y los pequeños, es determinante. Y queda mucho por hacer, pero probablemente no hay atajos. Tendremos que comprimir algo que resulta revolucionario en muchos frentes. No se trata de cambiar en algunos puntos, algunas de las cosas que hacemos, sin una transformación muy profunda. Y por eso, ahora que estamos a pocos días del inicio de la Conferencia de Naciones Unidas de Cambio Climático en Egipto, creo que es capital que Europa vaya orgullosa y transparente a explicar lo que está ocurriendo. Hay una falta de confianza también a nivel internacional. ¿Qué ocurre? En cuanto tienen un problema, vuelven para atrás y queman carbón de nuevo. Y eso es enormemente peligroso, porque o se explica bien lo que está ocurriendo o la tentación de así que yo espero, porque esto no era verdad, nos precipitaría a todos a un abismo de difícil solución en el medio plazo. Y creo que es perfectamente explicable que pueda haber esos dientes de sierra en el cortísimo plazo, esa flexibilidad, porque es imposible sustituir de un día para el otro todo, pero que ese ejercicio debe realizarse en paralelo a un acelerón del resto de las medidas de cambio, que hay que ser profundamente transparente y sincero en esa situación, tanto con respecto a los compromisos como con respecto al por qué se producen esas desviaciones, porque es seguridad energética, pero es compromiso con los horizontes de medio y largo plazo, y ahí no podemos fallar. Se abre un debate importante en torno a la adaptación y la resiliencia. Ponía como ejemplo esas perturbaciones clarísimas en el sistema energético o en la movilidad de mercancías en muchos de nuestros países vecinos a través de las cuencas fluviales que se han visto profundamente perturbadas a lo largo de este verano. ¿Cómo no hablar de situaciones mucho más duras de seguridad alimentaria o de acceso a formas básicas de energía en el continente africano, que es donde se celebra esta COP? Por tanto, claro que hay que hablar de adaptación, claro que hay que hablar de resiliencia, y no hay que hacerlo tampoco en ese lado desde la perspectiva de un poquito aquí, un poquito allá de bastar. No, no, es una transformación enormemente profunda en ese campo también, para la que también se requiere contar con las habilidades, las cualificaciones profesionales que nos permitan pensar el desarrollo de una manera distinta y con una solidaridad y una equidad en las relaciones entre países que todavía no se produce al nivel que se requiere. ¿Quién va a resolver las grandes crisis migratorias de un país como Bangladesh en el supuesto de grandes inundaciones? ¿Quién va a resolver las grandes crisis migratorias del continente africano si los episodios de degradación de suelo, sequía y falta de alimento se enquistan y crecen? En realidad hay que pensar en esa dimensión. Por eso vamos a ver también cómo cobra fuerza este debate en torno a las pérdidas y daños irreparables y hasta qué punto la capacidad de aportar un valor marginal diferente, enormemente sustantivo y probablemente insustituible de la comunidad internacional o del trabajo a nivel regional y subregional es determinante, pero sin que se nos olvide la primera regla. La medida más relevante desde el punto de vista de la adaptación a los efectos del cambio climático consiste precisamente en dejar de generar las causas que lo provocan. Así que tenemos muchísimas cosas que hacer. Es un gusto saber que se puede contar con una sociedad dinámica, con actores tan distintos y con una capacidad de visión y de análisis muy diferente. Esperamos que Juan José cumpla esa promesa y que con Gonzalo, Lara y tantos otros en el Instituto Elcano nos sigáis dando muchísimas ideas y muchísima fuerza para tomar las decisiones sobre la base del mejor conocimiento, el mejor análisis y la capacidad crítica que permita evaluar qué es de lo que estamos haciendo lo que resulta más eficaz, qué es lo que hay que corregir, qué es lo que hay que ampliar. Pero también, obviamente, con las grandes empresas, con las pequeñas empresas, con los medios de comunicación, no se nos olvide, el cambio cultural que se requiere es de una magnitud inmensa, inmensa, inmensa. No basta pensar que con un pequeño parche resolvemos el asunto. Y para eso, o todos estamos abocados pensando en un horizonte compartido a medio y largo plazo, o el riesgo de desviarse con las alteraciones que encontremos en el camino en esta década turbulenta se disparan exponencialmente. Así que muchísimas gracias a todos. Espero que en algún momento nos hagáis llegar las conclusiones de los debates tan interesantes que habéis tenido esta mañana y hasta la próxima. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, vicepresidenta, y con esto damos por concluida la jornada.